Chapter 860. The waves of the river surged, and the Enchi filled the sky. Countless resentful spirits and ferocious ghosts rushed out from the river under the stone bridge. There were humans, demonic beasts, and some other races that had never been seen before. All of them had ferocious faces, and the aura of death was terrifyingly dense. With a rumbling sound, the space trembled violently, as if it was about to collapse in the next moment. "Go! Rush to the other side!" Lin Tian shouted in a low voice. These resentful spirits rushed out from the river endlessly. If they continue to resist, they will be drowned sooner or later. Bai Ziki and the others naturally understood this point. They each used their divine abilities and techniques to shatter the wraiths before transforming into bolts of lightning and charging towards the other side of the bluestone bridge. In the blink of an eye, they crossed the remaining section of the bridge and appeared on the other side. Roar! The dense, resentful spirits roared, their faces ferocious, but they couldn't rush out of the range of the river. They were all blocked inside. This kind of roar was somewhat terrifying, shaking the river and causing the waves to surge, causing the 4 people and 1 crocodile to be frightened. Terrifying! Bai Chio shrank her neck. These resentful spirits may be nothing individually, but when gathered together, they are somewhat terrifying. The resentment and death aura intertwined together can almost corrode everything. Wishing Crocodile was quite unhappy with these resentful spirits. It threw out another beam of light, instantly obliterating a large number of them. After crossing the blue stone bridge, the air became colder. Bai Chio looked at a blue stone platform not far away and moved towards it. "Is this really the village viewing platform? I heard that standing on the village viewing platform, you can directly see your hometown and relatives," she murmured. It has been a long time since she left home. She somewhat missed it. Hearing what she said, Lin Tian was also slightly moved. It has been a few years since he separated from his younger sister, Lin Shi, Ji Yu, and Su Shu. He also missed Shui Yi and Ling Yun very much. "After this, I have to go back and take a look," he whispered to himself. Suddenly, a low voice sounded. "Why are you crawling? Come down!" Lin Tian was startled by this voice. When she came back to her senses, she saw Bai Ziki scolding Bai Chio with a dark expression. This was because this girl had forcefully climbed onto the bluestone platform. This left him speechless. This place was the heavenly palace of death, and this stone platform was on the other side of the bridge. There was nothing beside it, so it might be something ominous. Was this girl not afraid of encountering danger? Even the 5 Elements crocodile was a little embarrassed. Cough, cough. This little girl is quite curious, and her courage is also quite fat. The group ran over and saw Bai Chio curling his lips in disappointment. "It's fake. I can't see anything." As she spoke, she jumped down lightly. Seeing that she was fine, Lin Tian was also relieved. This is only slightly similar to the legendary hell. Don't take it seriously. Let's continue forward, he said. The river churned, and the resentful spirits were still roaring. They wanted to rush over, but unfortunately they couldn't. The group didn't stay in this place. They followed a wide path on the other side and carefully walked down. The air on the other side of the bluestone bridge was gloomier than the other side. Dark clouds rolled in the sky, as if they could fall at any time. In front of them, black mountains intertwined on the ground. The mountains were majestic, covered in stone scales. It's like a true dragon was beheaded on the ground. Lin Tian muttered to himself. Then he shuddered. He was frightened by his own words. Bai Chio noticed his strange behavior and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Lin Tian shook his head. He sorted out his emotions and calmed down in the blink of an eye. Bai Chio glanced at him strangely, but didn't say anything. The group continued forward. Not long after, they walked very far away. The chill in the air became even thicker. It was also at this time that a very strong smell of blood came from ahead. The 4 people and 1 crocodile were all shocked. They looked at each other and quickened their pace. Soon, they crossed several hundred feet and saw a corpse lying on the ground. The corpse died in a rather miserable state. A long spear had pierced through the center of his brows. His eyes were still wide open. It seems that he hasn't been dead for too long. There are fluctuations of Tao laws intertwining in the air. Baiziki said. This was the corpse of a middle-aged man. He should have been in the great Tao realm when he was alive. His face was covered in blood and white brain matter. Wishing Crocodile said. He should have broken free from the restraints of the bell here and regained control of his body. However, he couldn't escape the pursuit of those armored soldiers and was nailed to death here. Lin Tian and the others nodded. Clearly it was as Wishing Crocodile said. After all, they had seen the scene of Baiziki and Yang Qi being chased by the armored soldiers after breaking free from the restraints of the bell. Moreover, the spear that pierced through the middle-aged man's forehead was the symbol of those armored soldiers. They could recognize it at a glance. There are more over there, Bai Chio whispered. Lin Tian and the others raised their heads. There were several other corpses lying not far away. Some had their hearts pierced, some had their throats pierced, and some had even been torn in half. Blood dyed the ground red. It was a rather ghastly sight. There were faint fluctuations of Tao laws intertwining around these corpses. Clearly, they were all experts of the great Tao realm when they were alive. Speaking of which, although great Tao cultivators aren't too strong, they are definitely not weak either. However, in this place, they are as weak as ants. Wishing Crocodile sighed. Lin Tian didn't say anything. This place was indeed terrifying. There were dangers everywhere. Any evil creature that jumped out was extremely terrifying. Let's go. Be careful, he said. Lord Crocodile really doesn't want to go any further. What kind of broken place is this? Wishing Crocodile gritted his teeth, but he still flapped his wings and followed. If they didn't move forward, they might never be able to get out. Sooner or later, they would be trapped in this heavenly palace and die. As they moved forward, the Yin fog in the air became thicker. As the group stepped into Wishan, they suddenly smelled a strange fragrance, which shocked everyone. The fragrance was so strong that it was a little shocking. It was mixed with a majestic psionic power, which made the pores all over their bodies open up. They took a deep breath and followed the medicinal fragrance. Soon they saw a small pool. In the middle of the pool was a purple grass with divine light floating around it. At this time, they found this place. The fragrance in the air was even thicker. It was like the legendary divine aura of the divine realm, which made the four people and the crocodile feel like they were about to ascend. However, Wishing Crocodile cursed on the spot. Damn it! Such a strong fragrance. Lord Crocodile thought I had encountered a divine herb. It turned out to be this unlucky thing. Soul-rotting grass, Baiziki said. Yes, it's soul-rotting grass. Wishing Crocodile cursed. This grass is purple in color and exudes an amazing fragrance. It can strengthen a cultivator's soul by at least 3 times. However, it will corrode the flesh and blood while strengthening the soul. It will contaminate the strengthened soul, making the flesh and blood unable to reunite. It will turn the body into something that is neither human nor ghost. I was happy for nothing. I also thought I had encountered a divine herb. Bai Chio curled his lips. Next to him, Lin Tian's eyes were intertwined with a surprised expression. It's useful to me, he said, and directly raised his hand to grab the soul-rotting grass. Wishing Crocodile glared and grabbed him. Kid, are you crazy? Once this thing gets close to a cultivator's flesh and blood, it will directly corrode the flesh and blood. Do you want to be melted? Besides, what are you going to do with this lousy thing? Baiziki and the other two tilted their heads and looked at Lin Tian strangely. According to the ancient records, the soul-rotting grass was a highly poisonous grass with a foul power. Most cultivators stayed away from it. Don't worry, it's fine. I have a use for it. It's very useful, Lin Tian Andao said. There was joy in his eyes. Dragon patterns intertwined in his hand and he grabbed the soul-rotting grass. His arm was unharmed. Then, he took it back and set a seal with the secret technique recorded in the dragon burial scripture. Only then did he throw it into the stone ring. Wishing Crocodile looked surprised. As expected of the dragon burial scripture, it completely isolated the soul-rotting grass's corrosive power. As it said that, it looked at Lin Tian with some confusion. Kid, what are you going to do with it? Refined pills, Lin Tianandao said. He had control of the master apothecary's medicine encyclopedia. There was an amazing divine pill whose core ingredient was the soul-rotting grass. The soul-rotting grass was of no use to the cultivators in the world. Many people didn't want to get close to it, but it was very rare. He didn't expect to find one in this place. To him, it was a good harvest, because the effect of the divine pill that used the soul-rotting grass as the core ingredient was really extraordinary and very tempting. Refined pills? Refined pills for what? You know how to refine pills? The Five Elements alligator was surprised and asked several questions in a row. Lin Tianyi smiled. He did not explain why he knew how to refine pills. He simply explained the effects of the Baodan. It can increase one's combat power, speed, consciousness, and other aspects by 10 times in an instant. Moreover, there are no side effects. Of course, this effect is only temporary. It can last for about an hour. Hearing this, the three people and the crocodile's expressions changed. Wishing Crocodile's eyes widened. Kid, are you serious? Yes. Lin Tian nodded and continued. However, with my current level of refining pills, I can't refine those divine pills. I have to at least reach the peak of the 7th grade alchemist level. There were alchemists in the 10 directions celestial domain. From weak to strong, they were roughly divided into 9 levels, from the 1st to the 9th. He was currently at the 5th grade alchemist level. Hearing his words, the three people and the crocodile could not help but be surprised again. Their expressions changed again and again. It should be known that there were several kinds of Baodan in the cultivation world that could increase a cultivator's strength in an instant. However, after the effect of the Baodan that Lin Tian mentioned at this moment, there were all kinds of serious side effects. However, the Baodan that Lin Tian mentioned at this moment did not have such side effects at all. Moreover, the increase in strength was extremely shocking. It could increase a cultivator's strength in all aspects by 10 times in an instant. This was amazing. Chapter 861. The 3 men and 1 crocodile looked at Lin Tian in shock. They were all shocked by the magical effect of the Baodan mentioned by Lin Tian. It could increase one's strength by 10 times in an instant without any side effects. It was too powerful and tempting. Hurry up and cultivate to the peak of the 7th grade alchemist level and refine that Baodan. Give me 8 or 10 of them. Wishing Crocodile's eyes lit up. Such a magical pill was an absolute killer at some critical times. Lin Tian glanced at it. Why don't you say I'll give you 100 or 80 of them? He said. There's only one soul-rotting grass. It has to be specially processed and refined. In the end, it can only refine 3 Baodan at most. You want 8 or 10 of them, so little? 5 Elements stared. What do you think it is? Fasting pill? Can it be mass-produced? Lin Tian was speechless. Wishing Crocodile opened its mouth, then was speechless. Finally, it rolled its eyes. Thinking about it, the magical effect of the Baodan that Lin Tian mentioned was amazing and had no side effects. It was normal that it was difficult to refine. Whoosh! In this group of Wushan mountains, a cold wind blew, sometimes strong, sometimes light, bringing up strands of sand and dust. The group left and went around the small pool. They carefully looked around and continued to go deeper. Not long after, they saw corpses again. They were nailed to the ground, and there were a lot of them. There were dozens of them, and they all died miserably. Those who can break free from the bondage of the bell are all extraordinary people. It's a pity that they died here. Wishing Crocodile sighed. Lin Tian and the other 3 felt the same, but they didn't say anything. They just nodded secretly. There was a lot of blood on the ground. The 4 men and 1 crocodile continued to walk forward. The yin-chi in the air became thicker. A dark yin-chi floated from the front, and the cold air inside made the 4 men and 1 crocodile stiffen. After walking for more than 10,000 feet, a large gorge appeared in front of them. The gorge was not deep, about 10 feet or so. The black death mist rolled in it like waves, turbulent and surging. Looking down, there were densely packed figures standing in the gorge. They were all covered in armor and were no different from the armored soldiers from before. There were so many of them that it was frightening. Suddenly, the 4 men and 1 crocodile changed their expressions. "There are so many of these things?" The group was stunned. The armored soldiers in the gorge were both humanoid and beast-shaped. There were at least 1,000,000 of them. If so many armored soldiers rushed out together, they could overturn the world. Because in this gorge, they could clearly feel that there were many armored soldiers with extremely terrifying auras. They were comparable to Nirvana realm cultivators. At the same time, they saw a human cultivator in the gorge being entangled by wisps of black fog. Then, armor gradually appeared on the surface of the cultivator's body, slowly covering his entire body, turning him into a new armored soldier. "Damn it, I saw this cultivator outside the heavenly palace before. Now that he's been trapped here, he's been forced to become an armored soldier. These armored soldiers, are they all transformed from the living beings absorbed by the Extreme Temple? All the living beings that were absorbed into the Extreme Temple in the past have all turned into these armored soldiers." Wishing Crocodile's heart palpitated. Lin Tian's expression also changed. Wishing Crocodile's guess was not wrong. The armored soldiers in this heavenly palace were all transformed from the cultivators that were absorbed by the Extreme Temple. At this time, Baichio tugged on his sleeve and pointed to a place on the opposite side of the gorge. There. Lin Tian looked in the direction Baichio pointed, and his body suddenly trembled. On the opposite side of the gorge, there was a huge platform with intertwined patterns. A stone book was erected on it, intertwined with an extremely dense aura of time. It was difficult to tell how long it had been since ancient times. 3 ancient seal characters were engraved on it. Book of Life and Death. Lin Tian felt as if his head had been hit by something. Suddenly, there was a buzzing sound. After opening his mouth, he could only spit out 2 words that he hadn't heard in a long time. F***CK. Book of Life and Death. There was a stone book here, and the words, Book of Life and Death, were engraved on it. These 3 words were not unfamiliar to anyone. According to legends, it was the thing that controlled the life and death of all living beings in hell. Bai Ziki, Yang Qi, and Wishing Crocodile were all stunned. They all trembled as if they had lost their souls. This. Wishing Crocodile was tongue-tied. After saying this, for a long time, he was stunned and couldn't utter a complete sentence. At this time, the group felt as if they had been splashed with a basin of bone-piercing cold water. They felt cold from head to toe, and they felt that the air here had become demonic. Lin, brat, no. This is not good. Lord Crocodile feels that. We can't stay here. Even if we can't get out of this heaven palace, we can't stay near this gorge. Wishing Crocodile swallowed hard. In fact, Lin Tian wasn't any better. At this time, his heart couldn't help but beat violently. Before this, when they crossed the green stone bridge and Wishing Crocodile called it the Bridge of Helplessness and the River of Forgetfulness, he didn't think much of it. After all, it was just similar. However, at this time, in such a place where the aura of death was turbulent, a stone book erected on a platform with the words, Book of Life and Death, clearly engraved on it made his scalp go numb. Let's go! He opened his mouth and carefully retreated. At this time, he keenly felt that something bad was going to happen. Wishing Crocodile flapped his wings carefully and followed beside him. Baichio and the other 2 also moved back with vigilance. At this time, within the gorge, the aura of death rolled and surged up. Whoosh! 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 The armored soldiers in the gorge woke up and rushed out with a monstrous aura of death. They held spears and pressed toward the 4 people and the crocodile. Oh my God! Wishing Crocodile couldn't help but tremble and shrink his neck. This was because there were more than 1 or 2 armored soldiers rushing out of the gorge. There were more than 100 of them, like a real torrent of death pressing down on them, wanting to destroy everything. Lin Tian clenched his fist and threw out a dazzling fist aura. It destroyed everything in its path and repelled the first few armored soldiers who rushed over. They flew back the way they came. "Let's go back to the Wushan Mountains where we came from. Find a hidden place to hide all of our aura," he said. Clang! At this time, the sound of weapons rang out in front of them. The entire space trembled. 9 headless ghost corpses blocked their way. One of the ghost corpses waved a bronze halberd and slashed the heaven and earth. The 4 people and the crocodile's hearts palpitated as they quickly retreated. "Damn it! Why do these 9 bastards always come out to cause trouble? Previously, they stopped us from going to the main hall, and now they're here." Wishing Crocodile was furious. Clang! 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 A group of armored soldiers chased after them. In the blink of an eye, they surrounded the 4 people and the crocodile. The aura of death surged and almost knocked the 4 people and the crocodile over. They chased after them and waved the spears in their hands. Their movements were simple and direct, mercilessly piercing toward the 4 people and the crocodile. Lin Tian gritted his teeth and growled. He waved his golden iron fist and punched with all his strength. Boom! With a boom, the group of armored soldiers at the front were smashed and sent flying, rolling hundreds of feet away. Baiqiu held up the starry sky and the moon. At the same time, he activated the Great Tao Law, enveloping the dozens of armored soldiers and knocking them to the ground. Bai Ziki and Yang Qi did not hold back either. Each of them activated their own tyrannical techniques to face the armored soldiers that surrounded them. Great 5 Elements Art! Wishing Crocodile cursed as he activated the Great Tao Law of the 5 Elements, and activated the dozens of armored soldiers. Then, the group all activated their divine weapons. Their divine might was vast and mighty, and the shadows of their weapons crisscrossed in this space. At this time, there were too many armored soldiers charging at them. Each of them could kill a great Tao cultivator. How could they hold back? Clang! The ear-piercing sound of the halberds rang out. The 9 headless ghost corpses pressed forward together. The 9 bronze halberds were like weapons that could destroy the world. Although their surfaces were dull and even mottled with rust, they were extremely terrifying. The 4 people and the crocodile were all frightened. They did not dare to face them head-on. They could only rely on their speed to dodge such attacks. The 9 ghost corpses' movements were sluggish. After their attacks missed, they raised the bronze halberds in their hands again and mercilessly slashed down. The group each activated their extraordinary movement techniques and dodged again. Fortunately, their movements are sluggish and slow. Otherwise, they could kill all of us in an instant. Whooshing Crocodile trembled. This was the truth. The 9 ghost corpses' strength was extremely terrifying and beyond imagination. If not for their sluggish movements and disorderly attacks, even a Nirvana cultivator would not be able to resist for long. Lin Tian naturally knew this. At this moment, he activated the reincarnation diagram. After sweeping away a few armored soldiers in front of him, he once again dodged a headless ghost corpse's halberd. However, although he dodged, he still felt his whole body go cold, and his heart turn cold. He felt that if that halberd had struck him directly, even if he did not die, he would have lost most of his life. Roar! Right at this moment, a roar rang out. The deathly mist in the gorge surged even more violently as a withered figure stepped out. This figure was not covered in armor. His hair was grayish-brown like withered grass. His eyes were deeply sunken, like the birth of a peerless evil spirit. Before he even got close, the 4 people and the crocodile trembled and each of them coughed out a mouthful of blood. Nirvana Ghost Saint! Wishing Crocodile trembled and its expression changed greatly. Lin Tian and the others were also greatly shocked, and their backs became even colder. The Nirvana Ghost Saint was a legendary ghost that was comparable to a Nirvana stage expert. Moreover, it was far more powerful than an ordinary Nirvana stage expert. With their current cultivation, They would definitely die if they were to face such a Nirvana ghost saint. Even if Lin Tian released the demonized middle-aged man from the stone ring, it would be impossible for him to block the ghost saint. The ghost saint was simply too terrifying. The withered figure had very little hair on his head, and there was not the slightest bit of spirit in his sunken eyes. He was like a puppet. When he stepped out, the deathly mist surged like a river of stars, shocking everyone. Chapter 862. Blood splattered in the air. The 4 people and the crocodile were in an extremely sorry state. They were sent flying for a long distance before they could barely stabilize themselves. They quickly circulated the ancient demonic arts to repair their bodies. Boom! At this time, the space shook violently. The withered figure was even closer. It was like a real death god was pressing over. The mist of death around its body covered the sky. For a moment, the 4 people and the crocodile trembled together. The crocodile broke out in cold sweat. His strong body couldn't help but tremble. Kid Lin, quick! Let the little guy in your body shine. Maybe only the little guy can help us. Whooshing Crocodile shouted. Lin Tian didn't dare to hesitate. He directly shook his divine sense and called the little guy beside the life source. The little guy was usually in a deep sleep. After Lin Tian called with his divine sense for 2 breaths, the little guy finally woke up. It immediately made a "ya" sound, and all the patterns on the surface of the divine egg lit up. Buzz! For a moment, the light of the divine patterns spread out through Lin Tian's body and instantly intertwined around his body. Suddenly, the withered figure of the Nirvana ghost saint trembled violently, as if it had seen something extremely terrifying. It directly fell from the sky. At the same time, the armored soldiers and the 9 headless ghost corpses surrounding the 4 people and the crocodile trembled and retreated together. One of the ghost corpses even dropped the bronze halberd in its hand. Whooshing Crocodile stared. Although he felt that the little guy in the divine egg was very unusual and might be able to help them, he didn't expect it to be so terrifying. So exaggerated? Bai Ziki and Bai Chiu were also surprised. Yang Qi was the most surprised because he didn't know about the existence of the little guy before. Lin Tian was naturally shocked, but there was obviously not much time for him to be shocked at this time. He forcibly put away his surprise in an instant and shouted in a low voice. Let's go! The little fellow in the divine egg was not simple. The aura it emitted could cause many powerful creatures to feel fear, but in the end, it was only fear of that kind of aura. At this moment, if the ghost sage charged over recklessly, it would definitely be able to tear them apart easily. This was because the little fellow had not truly been born yet. It was still in the egg, so it was impossible for it to display its true battle strength. Bai Chiu and the others clearly saw through Lin Tian's expression and quickly retreated behind Lin Tian. Their speed was very fast. In the blink of an eye, they had shaken off the withered figure and the 9 ghost corpses. They were already several thousand feet away. Suddenly, the depths of the palace quaked. A terrifying aura rushed out like an erupting volcano, causing the entire palace to tremble. In the depths, on the platform opposite the Great Gorge, the stone book engraved with the 3 ancient seal characters of the Book of Life and Death began to vibrate. Waves of terrifying yin fog rushed into the sky. Immortal! Vaguely, an incomparably hazy voice came from the Book of Life and Death, causing the sky to tremble. In the next moment, an enormous rumble resounded as Shi Shushin rose up from the ground and instantly stood above the sky, causing the withered figure, the 9 ancient corpses, and all the armored soldiers to tremble as if they were kneeling before their master as they kowtowed towards the sky. It's rushing out! Run! The 4 people and the crocodile's expression changed drastically. They never expected the Book of Life and Death to rush out from the platform. In the sky, a crack appeared on the Book of Life and Death. The outer layer of stone fell off in the blink of an eye, revealing an ancient book flickering with black light. It was full of innate Tao patterns, branded with tiny ancient seal characters that interweaved with eerie light. With a loud bang, the Book of Life and Death shone with a dazzling black light. It was as if a deity of the underworld had come into being, majestically descending from the sky. Crack! In an instant, the large space shattered. The chaotic light overflowed, and the eerie black light seemed to want to destroy everything. In just an instant, the divine egg in Lin Tian's body trembled slightly. The light emitted by the little fellow was directly extinguished. It's coming for the little fellow! Lin Tian's expression changed. He transmitted his voice to Bai Ziki and the others to speed up their retreat. However, in the next moment, he trembled violently. The surrounding space was completely confined, making it difficult for him to even move a finger. Bai Ziki and the others were in the same situation as him. At this moment, he looked at the sky with a chill all over his body. He could only watch as the Book of Life and Death suppressed them. Damn it! He was shocked and furious, but there was nothing he could do. The aura emitted by the Book of Life and Death had sealed everything. Boom! At this moment, the heavenly palace of death suddenly trembled violently again. Another terrifying aura appeared. With a crack, a corner of the heavenly palace shattered. A stone coffin rushed out, seemingly from the outside world. The aura it emitted was not inferior to the Book of Life and Death. It ruthlessly slammed into the Book of Life and Death. With a bang, the Book of Life and Death was sent flying. It crashed into a mountain not far away, destroying the entire mountain on the spot. Lin Tian and the others were shocked. At this moment, they could move again. They quickly retreated until they were tens of thousands of feet away. They stopped and looked back. What's this? A coffin? Bai Chou's heart palpitated. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing special about the stone coffin. It looked very ordinary. However, at this moment, it was wrapped in a hazy light mist. It floated high in the sky, and a huge black hole appeared in the void around it. It seemed to lead to the end of the universe. It devoured space, air, and even light. It was extremely terrifying. Lin Tian's expression was shocked. He was shocked by the ferocity of the stone coffin. It was as if it could bury everything. Bai Ziki, Yang Qi, and the wishing crocodile were naturally shocked. The wishing crocodile was already lying on top of Lin Tian's head, tugging on a lock of Lin Tian's hair. However, at the next moment, it suddenly changed its expression. It stared at the stone coffin in the sky and said, Why does it look so familiar? The stone coffin stretched across the sky like the king of all ages, devouring the heavens and the earth. Boom! In the depths of the heavenly palace, the Book of Life and Death that was knocked away rushed up again. The ancient patterns on it flickered, and the intertwining light became denser. First God! Another voice came from it. It was not clear, as if it was sleep-talking. Then, with a boom, it emitted an incomparably dazzling light and rushed directly towards the stone coffin. The stone coffin trembled. The black holes around it devoured everything and rushed towards the Book of Life and Death. In an instant, the two collided violently. Ka! In just an instant, the sky of the heavenly palace collapsed inch by inch. Chaotic light, yin light, yang light, turbid light, and all kinds of light were struck out. The space was directly shattered into pieces. The two shook at the same time. The Book of Life and Death's dim light surged. The stone coffin pulsed with dark light and rushed towards the other side again. Boom! 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 The two collided continuously. Heaven and earth collapsed and everything was destroyed. The four people and the crocodile trembled together. Even though they were far away, they felt as if their bodies were about to split open. A sense of fear rose in all of them. Without hesitation, they retreated into the distance again. In the blink of an eye, they rushed tens of thousands of feet away. That stone coffin, what is it? It's colliding with the Book of Life and Death? They all have consciousness? After the void is shattered, it usually recovers quickly. But now, it's difficult to recover. Moreover, it's transforming into the primordial chaos. The group was stunned. They were completely stunned by the scene in front of them. Boom! In front of them, the stone coffin and the Book of Life and Death seemed to be natural enemies. They kept colliding, causing the sky to shatter and the earth to collapse. Destructive waves filled every corner of the sky. With a bang, the stone coffin was sent flying. It crashed into a nearby dark mountain and sank into the eternal void. However, this was only for an instant. The next moment, the stone coffin shattered the eternal void and rushed out. It was as if a supreme god was pressing down. With a bang, it smashed the book of life and death into the ground. Crack! The earth split open. The book of life and death rushed up. The dim light was violent. The ancient runes trembled as if they were alive and rumbled. The stone coffin was simple and direct. It collided with the vast and mighty light fog that filled the sky, bombarding many black holes and black cracks. This is simply, even the legendary heavenly treasures are nothing more than this, right? What kind of power is this? It can shatter heaven and earth with a slight move. The four people and the crocodile were shocked. At this time, they had no choice but to retreat again. The collision between the stone coffin and the book of life and death was too terrifying. The consequences were terrifying to the extreme. At this time, the void was almost completely destroyed and had not recovered. It looked like the entire place was wrapped in chaos. The air, space, and everything else had been annihilated. The book of life and death glowed again. The ancient runes on it seemed to have come to life. They stretched out from it and made clanking sounds like chains. They penetrated the void and pierced through eternity, directly entangling the stone coffin. Boom! Billowing black fog rushed out from the chain-like ancient runes. It covered the sky and completely submerged the stone coffin. The four people and the crocodile were shocked. It wants to refine the stone coffin? Boom! The sky shook violently. An aura that caused all living things to tremble surged out from the black fog. It was appalling. Then, in an instant, the black fog that submerged the stone coffin was shaken away. The ancient runes that bound the stone coffin also shattered bit by bit and dissipated in the blink of an eye. Squeak! A crisp sound rang out. The stone coffin shook and a corner of the coffin lid moved. Light and fog interweaved inside as if a great world was buried inside. A desolate power that could shatter the universe emerged and directly enveloped the book of life and death, crushing the void. The book of life and death shook violently. The ancient runes rushed out like chains again and attacked the stone coffin, almost overturning it. Squeak! The stone coffin trembled slightly and made a crisp sound again. The coffin lid moved a little to the side again. An even more terrifying power surged out and flooded the book of life and death like a destructive current. Vaguely, through the gap in the coffin lid, the group saw the chaotic light and light rolling inside. There was another stone coffin lying horizontally, motionless. Lin Tian was shocked. There was actually another stone coffin inside the stone coffin? Chapter 863. Listening to Wishing Crocodile's words, Lin Tianyi was shocked. Wishing Crocodile once kicked this sarcophagus away. He paused for a moment, then his expression changed again. He remembered that when he was in the fourth heaven, Wishing Crocodile did say something like this. He said that he dug up a sarcophagus, and when he opened it, there was a second sarcophagus inside. After opening the second sarcophagus, there was a third sarcophagus inside. After opening the third sarcophagus, there was a fourth sarcophagus inside. The sarcophagus you kicked away was this one. He glared at Wishing Crocodile. That's it. It's definitely it. How could Lord Crocodile remember it wrongly? Wishing Crocodile howled. On the side, Bai Qiu, Bai Ziki, and Yang Qi naturally heard Wishing Crocodile's words, and they couldn't help but be shocked. Wishing Crocodile found this sarcophagus, and in the end, he kicked it away. Bai Qiu stared at it. Little Crocodile, this sarcophagus can easily crush an emperor-ranked powerhouse to death. You actually kicked it away. Did you use to treat heaven-defying divine treasures like dirt? Wishing Crocodile was furious. Damn girl, you feel uncomfortable if you don't make fun of Lord Crocodile, right? As it spoke, it couldn't help but howl again. It stared at the sarcophagus in front of it with a regretful expression. At first glance, this sarcophagus looked like a living celestial lord. Perhaps it was even more terrifying than a celestial lord. Its power was simply appalling. A slight movement seemed to be able to destroy eternity. Such a heaven-defying divine sarcophagus was actually kicked away by it. Boom! In front of it, an even more terrifying power overflowed from the sarcophagus. The light mist rolled like a mountain torrent, completely covering the book of life and death. Obviously, it wanted to destroy it. That terrifying power seemed to be able to reverse time and space, directly shattering everything. Staring at this scene, Wishing Crocodile felt even more pain. My #God of Time, please grant Lord Crocodile power. Let Lord Crocodile return to the past. Lord Crocodile promises to keep this divine sarcophagus safely. Lin Tian, Bai Qiu, Bai Ziki, and Yang Qi. Boom! Claps of thunder rumbled in the vast sky. The battlefield was truly shattered. The space did not recover after it was shattered. The stone coffin overflowed with boundless power, completely enveloping the book of life and death, turning the surroundings into a place of chaos. With another creaking sound, the outermost crack of the sarcophagus opened even wider, and the rolling light mist gushed out again. The life and death book trembled violently. Suddenly, not only did the ancient markings on it light up, but the densely packed Shujuan script also lit up. They transformed into ancient runes that flew out and forcibly dispersed the light fog that seeped out of the stone coffin. Clang! The Shijuan that flew out from the Book of Life and Death were like divine swords. They shone brightly and charged towards the stone coffin. Sizzling sounds reverberated as the space that had already transformed into a chaotic zone collapsed once more and transformed into a turbid state. This scene was terrifying to the extreme, causing the hearts of the four people and the alligator in the distance to tremble once again. Even the battles between emperors aren't that exaggerated, right? Bai Qiu shrunk his neck. Clang! 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 The Xiaozhuan script whistled like a dense rain of swords that sealed eternity and refined eternity. It enveloped the stone coffin and rained down crazily as if it wanted to penetrate it, causing the stone coffin to tremble nonstop. However, the stone coffin's sturdiness was beyond imagination. Even after being attacked by the dense Xiaozhuan script, it did not show any signs of damage. There were even wisps of starlight that appeared with sizzling sounds. Bai Ziki's eyes flickered as he said in a low voice, "That stone coffin looks like it's made of ordinary stone, but it's indeed ordinary stone." Lin Tian nodded as well. His eyes were bright, and his face was filled with shock. At this moment, the group was attracted by the battle between the stone coffin and the Book of Life and Death. They watched for a long time. The stone coffin's material was really ordinary, but it was unimaginably sturdy. It seemed like even if heaven and earth were to shatter, it would still exist eternally. Dong! With a shocking sound, the stone coffin was shaken open and once again crashed into the eternal void. Then, the dense Xiaozhuan script chased after it and crushed it mercilessly. With a Hong sound, boundless divine might swept out from the eternal void, shaking the boundless world. The stone coffin rushed out again, and from a crack in the corner, the second coffin moved a little, revealing a third stone coffin that was exactly the same as the first one. In an instant, an even more terrifying aura spread out, causing the Death Palace to shake violently. The ground kept cracking. The whooshing crocodile jumped on the spot. "That's it! That's the third stone coffin!" It pulled Lin Tian's hair, regretful and angry. It wailed, "But damn it! When Lord Crocodile first opened it, nothing happened. It was just a simple stone coffin. Am I playing tricks on Lord Crocodile?" Lin Tian's hair was pulled by the crocodile, and his scalp hurt. He could not help but grit his teeth and pull the crocodile off his head. "Enough! What are you howling for? You really want something to happen to it back then. If there was such a scene when you opened it back then, you would have been crushed into ashes. How could you still be alive now?" he said angrily. The wishing crocodile was stunned for a moment, but it immediately howled again. "That's better than Lord Crocodile's pain now." Lin Tian was speechless. "Little crocodile, you're so pitiful," Baichio said. Then, he opened his mouth and whispered, "I suddenly remembered that you kicked it back then. Now that it flew out, it seems to have some consciousness. Will it take revenge on you?" The whooshing crocodile almost fainted from anger. F***CK. Boom! Up ahead, a corner of the second sarcophagus lid opened, and a powerful force gushed out. Then, the third sarcophagus opened, revealing the fourth sarcophagus. An even more terrifying force gushed out, shattering the heavens and earth. Crack! 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 Crisp sounds were heard, and huge cracks appeared in the void of this death sky. Then, the ground of the Death Palace also collapsed, and monstrous yin fog surged out from the cracks. Lin Tianyi and the others felt chills down their spines. Once again, they fled into the distance, retreating more than 10,000 feet in a row. It was also at this time that a horrifying aura overflowed. Inside the stone coffin, the lid of the fourth stone coffin opened, revealing another stone coffin inside. The only difference was that there was a palm-sized pool of blood on the surface of this stone coffin. This pool of blood seemed to have just flowed out. It was swaying slightly, intertwined with a little bit of spiritual light and divinity. This stone coffin is conservatively estimated to have existed for more than 100,000 years. The pool of blood inside actually didn't solidify. Whose blood can remain in the river of time for so long without solidifying and drying up? The 4 people and 1 crocodile were aghast. The scene in front of them was too shocking and unimaginable. Boom! In front of them, the stone coffin trembled slightly. Inside, the pool of blood was only the size of a baby's palm. It was estimated that there were only about a dozen drops of blood in total. However, at this moment, this pool of blood flew out directly and suddenly turned into a sea of blood that covered the sky. It majestically shrouded the life and death book and directly drowned it. The 4 people and 1 crocodile were frightened by this scene, and their divine souls almost jumped out. Chi! 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 The sea of blood drowned the heaven and earth, and the space was annihilated inch by inch. The life and death book began to tremble violently. However, the power of the sea of blood was too terrifying. It surged violently and obliterated everything. Boom! The stone coffin trembled again, as if it was determined to destroy the life and death book. It overflowed with an even more terrifying power and crazily attacked the life and death book. In that place, the primal chaos after the space was shattered was beaten away. Nothing was left behind, and it became turbid. Lin Tian and the others were chilled and retreated again. What exactly is this stone coffin? That life and death book is really the legendary life and death book. It's really the thing in hell that controls the life and death of all living things. The life and death book is a legend. Now, a stone coffin wants to destroy the life and death book. The 4 people and 1 crocodile stopped after crossing another 20,000 feet. Their eyes were twitching violently. At this moment, the scene before their eyes was too shocking. A sarcophagus and the book of life and death were clashing. Both sides wanted to destroy the other. Who would believe such a thing if it was told to others? Buzz! In the primal chaos battlefield, the life and death book was shrouded in the boundless sea of blood. At this moment, it was emitting a gloomy light. It looked like an ancient book. At this moment, it flipped a page on its own and revealed even more densely packed ancient seal characters. Those seal characters were too mysterious and obscure. Even an old monster like the whooshing crocodile couldn't understand them. What era are these characters from? The group was shocked. Clang! After flipping a page, the life and death book became even more terrifying. Densely packed ancient seal characters flew out and shook the sky like true dragons. They pushed open the boundless sea of blood and went against the sky to crush the stone coffin. The stone coffin trembled and the crack on the coffin lid became even larger. All kinds of lights fell out from within and suppressed the seal characters rushing towards it. At the same time, the sea of blood that was pushed open by the life and death book exploded on its own and turned into a dense rain of blood that fell towards the depths of the gorge. Strands of Dao runes flickered on the surface of the blood rain. PFFF. 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 This was an unparalleled force. In the gorge, the densely packed armored soldiers exploded one after another. In the blink of an eye, more than half of them were annihilated. The 9 headless ghost corpses and the Nirvana-level ghost saint that rushed out naturally met with misfortune. They were all destroyed under this rain of blood. Moreover, the huge Dao platform in the depths of the gorge collapsed at the first moment. It was penetrated by the falling rain of blood and turned into a hornet's nest. With a cracking sound, it crumbled into ashes and completely disappeared from this world. Immediately, the turbulent aura of death in the depths of the gorge weakened. The chilling aura of the heavenly palace of death also decreased greatly in a flash. Boom! In the firmament, the life and death book trembled and emitted a gloomy light. Faintly, an indistinct roar of anger could be heard. Lin Tian and the others retreated once again and stared at the depths of the heavenly palace and the firmament. Their souls couldn't help but tremble. Why do I feel that the sea of blood that overflowed from the stone coffin was originally aimed at the densely packed armored soldiers in the depths of the heavenly palace and the Dao platform that contained the life and death book? Baiqiu shrunk his neck and said, P.S. Oh, today's second update should be around 18 p.m. The third update should be around 22 p.m. Chapter 864. Hearing Baiqiu's mutterings, Lin Tian and the others were slightly moved. That sarcophagus knew how to scheme? That book of life and death doesn't look like a good thing. Even if it's really scheming against it, it's only natural. Lin Tian now. The heavenly palace of death was the core of the extreme Yin temple. The book of life and death and the Dao platform it stood on were the core of the heavenly palace of death. The extreme Yin temple would absorb countless living beings into it every once in a while and turn them into such a powerful army because of the book of life and death. Inferring from this, the book of life and death seemed somewhat sinister, as if it was the big black hand behind the scenes. Beside him, Bai Ziki and Yang Qi nodded. They agreed with his words and felt the same way. Only the wishing crocodile was still staring at the sarcophagus with regret and pain. It looked like it wanted to swallow it whole. Boom! In front of them, the book of life and death shone even brighter. The ancient book flipped again and even more shocking seal scripts flew out. Each seal script was like a primordial heavenly treasure that pressed down on the sarcophagus like a destructive torrent. The sarcophagus trembled. In an instant, light and fog filled the sky and poured out of the sarcophagus like the Milky Way from the 9 heavens. At the same time, the blood rain that flew out condensed into 19 drops of blood. They instantly broke through space and pressed down. 1. The 19 drops of blood glowed. Each drop of blood contained boundless spirituality. In an instant, they trembled slightly, causing Lin Tian and the others to be moved. Even the pained wishing crocodile was shocked. It's like 19 great worlds, it said in shock. Lin Tian's eyes lit up as he stared ahead. It was hard to imagine how powerful the owner of these 19 drops of blood was. It was just a drop of blood, but not only did it not solidify after so many years, it even gave people such an illusion. So scary! Baiqiu swallowed his saliva. Boom! The 19 drops of blood rolled and trembled slightly. 19 blood waves covered the sky and rumbled toward the life and death book. The book of life and death flipped another page, and a dark glow filled the sky. It was as if an unparalleled underworld emperor had awoken. With a light shake, it destroyed everything and forced the 19 drops of blood back to their original form. Then, it enveloped all of them with a dark glow. Ancient seal scripts flew out and pressed down, as if it wanted to completely refine the 19 drops of blood. Creak! A soft sound rang out. The 5th coffin and the 4th stone coffin trembled, and slowly moved to the side. All of a sudden, a huge rumbling sound was heard as a large expanse of hazy yellow light flew out. It was incomparably terrifying, like the light at the beginning of the world. It collapsed everything and crushed the densely packed seal characters that were overflowing from the Book of Life and Death. Faintly, the four people and the crocodile looked at the sarcophagus in shock. Inside the fifth sarcophagus, within the hazy light, there was another sarcophagus lying motionlessly. This, a coffin within a coffin, another coffin, another coffin, another coffin, another coffin, another coffin, what is this thing? Baichio stared. The whooshing crocodile continued and said angrily, Lord Crocodile kicked it away because of this. Then it added, however, Lord Crocodile only opened the fourth sarcophagus and didn't open it after that. At the mention of this, it couldn't help but grind its teeth fiercely. Lin Tian glanced at it but didn't pay it any attention. At this time, he stared straight ahead. Dong! Inside the sarcophagus, after the fifth sarcophagus cracked open, the fluctuation seemed to devour everything and shook the world. Under such an aura, the Life and Death book trembled slightly. However, this was only for a moment. The next moment, the Life and Death book flipped again, and the dark glow became stronger. Boom! It flew out, breaking apart the endless light, and collided with the sarcophagus. For a moment, the celestial palace of death shook again. More cracks appeared on the ground like a spider web, spreading rapidly in all directions. Mountains were turned into eternal powder under the collision between the two. With a rustling sound, the Life and Death book continued to flip a page. At this time, it flipped to the sixth page. A destructive aura intertwined, and this time, it shook the sarcophagus away. The power of the Life and Death book becomes stronger with every page it flips, Bai Ziki said in a deep voice. Lin Tian nodded. Indeed, every time the Life and Death book was about to lose to the sarcophagus, it would flip to a new page. In this regard, the sarcophagus is similar. Every time a sarcophagus is opened, the power will increase exponentially, he said. Beside him, Baichio nodded and then muttered softly. The Life and Death book seems to have many more pages. I wonder how many similar sarcophagi are buried in the sarcophagus. What if there aren't enough pages to open? Lin Tian was speechless. This girl really knows how to think. Boom! The sarcophagus was shaken away. Light surged, causing the entire celestial palace of death to shake as if it was about to be overturned. Lin Tianyi and the others had retreated far away. At this moment, as the celestial palace of death shook, they all lost their balance as if they were swept up by a tornado. They were all sent flying more than 1,000 feet away with a fearful expression. They steadied themselves further away and stared straight ahead. Creak! The sarcophagus was shaken open. The outermost lid moved, causing the gap to widen. In an instant, there was a loud bang. It was as if a world of destruction had been pulled apart. Rolling light mist gushed out from within, causing the Life and Death book to tremble violently. The cracks in the void and earth of the celestial palace of death became even more severe. At the same time, the 19 drops of blood glowed. In the haze, a faint soul's shadow appeared. Its appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but it emitted waves of overbearing power. It was as if an ancient divine emperor had come back to life and punched at the Life and Death book. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the entire world was torn apart as if a great earthquake had taken place in the Palace of Death. Cracks spread everywhere and the mountains collapsed. Even the main gate in the distance trembled before shattering into pieces. A tyrannical punch. An invincible punch. With a loud bang, the Life and Death book was blown away. One could faintly hear the sound of porcelain breaking. It was directly thrown into the eternal void and didn't appear for a long time. In just a moment, the 4 people and 1 alligator were frightened. They had goosebumps all over their bodies while cold sweat ran down their backs. A remnant soul. Who was this? From the looks of it, it was just an incomplete soul. However, its form was too terrifying and shocking. With a single punch, it was able to punch the Book of Life and Death into the eternal void. Moreover, a shattering sound was heard. It felt as if a crack had appeared on the Book of Life and Death. Boom! In the sky, the soul's shadow was extremely faint. However, the entire celestial palace of death trembled because of its appearance. It stood in the sky like a god or an immortal. Even the great Tao was trembling. It slightly tilted its head to look at Lin Tian and the others. Immediately, the 4 people and 1 alligator trembled again. They felt as if their souls were about to shatter. Little alligator, did it discover you? It ran out from the sarcophagus. You kicked the sarcophagus away. Is it taking revenge on you? Baijiu shrunk his neck and said. F***CK. Damn girl, don't scare your Lord Alligator. This. Oh whoa. The whooshing crocodile no longer had the regretful expression from before. Its eyes were filled with horror. Lin Tian and the others were also frightened. How terrifying was this soul's shadow when it was alive? If it really came, even the violet fairy wouldn't be able to save them. Crack! There was a vibration in the sky. A corner of the void cracked open, and a dim light shone brightly. The Book of Life and Death rushed out with an obvious crack. Even the seal characters on it had dimmed a little. This made Lin Tian and the others even more horrified. They all swallowed hard. Although they didn't know if the Book of Life and Death here was the legendary Book of Life and Death, they had all seen its terrifying power. It could destroy everything. However, at this moment, the terrifying Book of Life and Death was actually cracked by a single punch from an illusory remnant soul. Boom! In the sky, the Book of Life and Death shone. The crack disappeared instantly, and the seal characters on it shone even brighter. Each seal character emitted billions of killing lights, instantly obliterating everything. First God. Its voice was intermittent, as if it was still sleep-talking. However, the destructive aura intertwined with it was 10,000 times more terrifying than before. The soul's shadow was incomparably faint, but it was unparalleled in the world. It was like a supreme being that opened the sky, looking down on the world. It took a step forward and punched forward. For a moment, chaotic light, yin and yang, black and yellow gas, and all kinds of lights appeared at the same time. Boom! The heavenly palace of death shook violently. The sky collapsed, and the earth shattered. This was an invincible fist's power. It was simple and direct, but it was extremely domineering. It shattered all the dim light outside the Book of Life and Death, and once again smashed the Book of Life and Death into the eternal void. The soul's shadow stood in the sky with 19 drops of true blood circling around it. The next moment, it took a step forward and rushed into the eternal void. Then, a loud bang came from the eternal void. It seemed that the soul's shadow and the Book of Life and Death were fighting in the void. Buzz! The sarcophagus shook and moved. It flew into the eternal void with the soul's shadow. Suddenly, the sarcophagus, the soul's shadow, and the Book of Life and Death all disappeared without a trace. However, the force of Hun Ying's punch did not dissipate. The remaining force was still vast and mighty in the heavenly palace, causing the heavenly palace to shake violently. The sky continued to collapse, and it would be difficult to recover in a short period of time. The ground also seemed to have experienced a super-earthquake. It continued to crack, and an endless stream of yin fog rushed out from it. Crack! 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 Cracking sounds sounded one after another, and the heavenly palace of death became even dimmer, as if it was about to be destroyed. Although there was no heavenly thunder tribulation, the scene was many times more terrifying than when Lin Tian attracted the heavenly tribulation. Lin Tian and the others were terrified. If the heavenly palace of death really collapsed, they would all be buried here. Crack! Another crisp sound came out. In front of them, the ground of the heavenly palace of death suddenly broke open, and light intertwined outside. Vaguely, the 4 people and 1 alligator saw mountains and rivers. It's the central part of the 5th heaven! Chapter 865. A genius will remember love in 1 second? Shuanet provides you with wonderful novels to read. A big hole appeared in the heavenly palace of death. Lin Tian and the others looked down. Below, There were mountains and rivers intertwined. Although it looked small due to the distance, they could still see it clearly. It's outside the heavenly palace of death, a corner of the central region of the fifth heaven. Let's go! Lin Tian now. As soon as his words fell, he was the first to step out, turning into a bolt of lightning and rushing towards the hole. The other 3 people and 1 alligator naturally didn't hesitate and quickly rushed over. Boom! The heavenly palace of death shook violently. The sky collapsed, the earth cracked, and the ground sank. The situation was extremely terrifying. It was a scene of doomsday. Lin Tian and the others rushed forward in this terrifying scene. Their speed was extremely fast, leaving behind afterimages. Finally, after 10 breaths, they entered the hole. With a whoosh, they passed through the hole in the next moment. For a time, the air became clear, and the world became bright again. We finally ran out! Baichio was pleasantly surprised. Looking down, the entire fifth heaven was in sight. Wisps of light wind were floating in the air. The air was warm, and spiritual energy was everywhere. It was no longer as gloomy as the heavenly palace of death, making them feel dozens of times more comfortable. Boom! Violent auras intertwined. In the sky, a huge palace of extreme energy was located amidst the dark clouds. At this moment, it was trembling violently, and many places were collapsing. Black light suddenly slid down, falling towards the fifth heaven like rain. This was different from the power of the Extreme Palace at the beginning. At this time, the Extreme Palace was disintegrating because of the fist of the mysterious remnant soul. Terrifying black light sputtered everywhere, falling towards the fifth heaven. Dodge! Lin Tian now. This kind of black light is very terrifying. If they are hit by it, even if they don't die, they will lose half of their life. For a time, the 4 people and 1 alligator moved quickly, dodging the falling black light while flying down. Crack! 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 The void cracked inch by inch under this black light, and the space turbulence intertwined. The scene was very terrifying. Love go little say W, Chu moreover, directly below, one could vaguely see that some mountains in the fifth heaven were also hit by the black light. They collapsed one after another, and some rivers were instantly vaporized by the black light. Ah! Screams and screams sounded vaguely. Naturally, not all the cultivators in the fifth heaven were absorbed into the Extreme Yin Temple. At this time, some cultivators who weren't absorbed into the Extreme Yin Temple for various reasons suffered a great calamity. Even great Tao masters couldn't resist the black light of death and were instantly turned into ashes. That grand hall has been floating in the sky for several months now. Previously, it sucked in countless fellow Taoists. Now, what is it going to do? Are they trying to destroy all the living beings in this realm? Wait a minute, that palace seems to be collapsing. Many cultivators were terrified. Boom! At the highest point in the sky, the Extreme Yin Temple was trembling amidst the dark clouds. One could see that many places were shattering. Even more deathly black light fell down involuntarily. There were even remains of the main hall that fell, smashing into the large space and destroying it. It was a terrifying scene. Oh woo! Run! 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 Whooshing crocodile howled. Lin Tian and the others were very fast. They moved quickly in the sky full of deathly black light, avoiding it one after another. Crack! 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 The void continued to crack, and huge cracks appeared one after another. Between these cracks, some interweaved spiritual light, some surged with mist, and some were plain and dull. In fact, the ground in the central region was even breaking apart and collapsing. Roiling death energy rushed out. Soldiers crawled up and roared towards the heavens. Seeing this scene, Lin Tian and the others were shocked. These deathly black lights fell like rain, splitting open some of the small spiritual domains and small spaces in this realm. Some of the tombs were also opened. Whooshing crocodile stared at the scene. After seeing the terrifying remnant soul in the sarcophagus, it no longer cared about the sarcophagus, because the remnant soul was too terrifying, and the sarcophagus was obviously the remnant souls. At this time, as far as the eye could see, cracks were constantly appearing in the void of the fifth heaven. Many space portals appeared in many places, which were obviously the entrances to the spiritual domains, causing the surrounding spiritual energy to become much denser. At the same time, many places on the ground cracked open, many mountains collapsed, and Inchi rushed out from some places. More tombs were opened, and the Inchi in some of the tombs was extremely dense, causing clouds of black mist to rise. For a time, the cultivators of the fifth heaven who weren't absorbed into the extreme Yin temple were all shocked. Spiritual domains! There are spiritual domains opening! And there are more than one! Oh my God! Over there, that tomb is filled with Yin Qi. Is the owner of the tomb a Nirvana realm powerhouse? Over there, I seem to feel the aura of Source Vein. On the ground, many cultivators were shocked. However, at the same time, screams could still be heard in many places. Many cultivators were struck by the black light and turned into blood mist on the spot. Crack! Suddenly, at the southern end of the central region, a small crack broke open. At first, it was very small, but it gradually became bigger, reaching a width of several meters. Immediately, a monstrous immortal chi intertwined with each other. Vaguely, one could see majestic mountains, precious herbs everywhere, and spirit birds flying in the sky. It was like the legendary immortal world. Immortal mist billowed, and wisps of light surged. As the crack grew bigger, more and more immortal chi rushed out. In the blink of an eye, the entire central region was intertwined with each other, and an amazing Tao connotation spread out, spreading in all directions. For a time, the fifth heaven was shocked again. That is? Ruoxian world divine land! This isn't the legendary immortal world in the central region, right? This, it seems to be true. Many cultivators were shocked. Many people even temporarily forgot that the endless black light of death was still falling from the sky. Lin Tianyi and the others dodged the black light of death and quickly approached the fifth heaven. At this time, they looked at the huge crack in the south with a shocked expression. It's the legendary immortal world! That's right! It must be it! It just so happened that the black light of death broke through the invisible space barrier, creating a space portal that leads to the inside. Whooshing Crocodile shouted. The deathly black light continued to descend from the sky, but the amount had clearly decreased by a lot. The space in the sky was distorted, and the dark clouds rolled. A super huge crack appeared in the void, and the Extreme Yin Temple slowly entered it. The Extreme Yin Temple flew away! Baichio stared. Why do we care about that broken place? It's best that it flew away. Let's go to that immortal world now. Who knows how many rare treasures there are inside? It is said that there are more than 2 Empyrean treasures. Let's go! We must snatch them all! Wishing Crocodile said. Hearing this, Baichio's eyes lit up. That makes sense! Lin Tian and the other two naturally didn't have any objections. As they gazed at the immortal mansion world, their eyes glinted. Just as Wishing Crocodile had said, that immortal estate world had existed for a very long time. There would definitely be many treasures inside. Most importantly, there was an Empyrean treasure inside. This was the most attractive part. For a moment, the 4 people and 1 alligator all increased their speed, dodging the already sparse black light of death as they flew towards the immortal estate world. Crack! In the fifth heaven, space cracks kept appearing in the void due to the black light of death. In the eastern part of the central region, a large space portal appeared, and wisps of demonic fog gushed out from it. Lin Tian, who was charging toward the immortal estate world, suddenly shuddered and stopped. He tilted his head and looked in that direction, his eyes shooting out 2 beams of divine light that were almost tangible. Boy, what's wrong with you? Why did you stop? Wishing Crocodile said. Baichio and the others also looked at him. Lin Tian looked at the space crack in the east, his eyes flashing. You all go to that immortal estate world first. I have something to do. I will catch up with you later. What? Listening to his words, the 3 people and 1 alligator were shocked. The opening of the immortal estate world was said to be the largest treasure trove in this heaven, containing countless immortal treasures, but Lin Tian actually wanted to go to another place at this time. You all go quickly, don't worry about me, Lin Tianandao said. After his words fell, he directly stepped forward, leaving behind afterimages with each step, directly heading towards the east. Just now, when the space crack in the east opened, the divine sword in his sea of knowledge shook, and a faint seven-colored light spread out, pointing towards that direction. This situation was too obvious. There must be a sword soul fragment there. His speed was very fast, like lightning, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the vision of the 3 people and 1 alligator. This kid? Whooshing Crocodile stared at him. What is he delaying for? Baichio frowned. Lin Tian abandoned the immortal estate world at this time and went to another place, which really puzzled the 3 people and 1 alligator. In the end, it was Bai Ziki who spoke. He chose to go to another place at this time. He must have his reasons. In addition, with his strength, we don't need to worry about anything. We will go to the immortal estate world, as he said. Baichio said, "Oh," and looked in the direction Lin Tian went. Then, the 3 people and 1 alligator sped up again, continuing to rush towards the immortal estate world. After leaving the 3 people and 1 alligator, Lin Tian's speed was very fast, the golden light on the surface of his body intertwining like a golden bolt of lightning. After about 2 hours, he finally arrived at the east of the central region, appearing in front of the space crack with faint demonic mist surging. This crack was equivalent to the void door to the spirit domain space. There are demonic veins intertwining within. There was a flash of light in his eyes, and he took a step forward. P.S. Third watch. Then, starting from tomorrow, the dragon will rest for a while and then continue with the 3rd watch. As for when the 3rd watch will continue, the dragon will tell everyone in advance. Chapter 866. Lin Tian stepped into the space shrouded in a faint demonic mist. He suddenly felt a trace of coldness, but he didn't care too much. This kind of coldness was too insignificant compared to the heavenly palace of death. At this time, looking around, the scene in this space was similar to the bloody space outside the small village in the 4th heaven. The space was a little dim, and wisps of black mist floated in the air. Lin Tian stepped into the space. Not far away, there was a short mountain range. It was bare, without any vegetation. He swept the area with his divine sense, then walked towards the depths of this space. He wasn't in a hurry. Dragon patterns extended from the soles of his feet and surged into the ground. Not long after, a faint ray of dragon pattern light flashed past his eyes. He discovered 7 great demonic veins in the ground of this space, extending all the way to the group of short mountains. He narrowed his eyes slightly and continued to walk deeper. Soon, he walked tens of thousands of feet and stepped into the short mountain range. Roar! Almost as soon as he stepped into the mountain range, a low roar sounded, and a fierce beast appeared and rushed towards him. This fierce beast's pupils were red and green, its body was covered with green hair, and its claws were as long as chopsticks. Lin Tian stepped forward, and the light of dragon patterns rushed out from the soles of his feet. With a bang, the fierce beast was sent flying, exploding in the distance, turning into a dazzling blood mist. Boom! The short mountain range trembled, and strange fierce beasts appeared one after another. Each of them had a tyrannical aura, comparable to a powerhouse at the immortal realm. There were more than 30 of them, and together, they rushed towards Lin Tian like a beast tide. Lin Tian raised his head, and a faint light flashed in his eyes as he stared at the more than 30 fierce beasts rushing towards him. Suddenly, these fierce beasts trembled together. Looking at Lin Tian's eyes, they all became fearful. They stopped rushing forward one by one, trembling in fear. They were ferocious beasts born in this small space. Although their intelligence was not very high, they still had a trace of intelligence. At this moment, they instinctively felt the terror of Lin Tian, who was like a god. Lin Tian's footsteps were very gentle. He walked past more than 30 ferocious beasts, and continued to walk deeper into this space. He was now in the third tier of the Great Path Realm, and he had fought all the way here. Countless Great Path Realm cultivators had died at his hands. Naturally, the aura he exuded was very frightening. At least, it was very frightening for these simple ferocious beasts. It was almost equivalent to a group of ants facing a supreme emperor. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, dozens of breaths had passed. He had walked another several hundred meters and arrived at the center of the short mountain range. After walking to this place, the surroundings clearly became much quieter, and the air also became much more oppressive. Nearby, the mountain rocks were all pitch black, and the demonic mist was extremely dense. It was like a small demonic land. A glimmer of light flashed across Lin Tian's eyes. However, he continued to walk towards the depths of this space. At this moment, dozens of hurricanes rolled up, and the insides were completely filled with demonic mist. They surrounded Lin Tian in the center. In the next moment, the dozens of hurricanes trembled. As if they had their own consciousness, they pressed down on Lin Tian from all directions. In the blink of an eye, dozens of hurricanes pressed down on him. Each hurricane was more than 100 meters tall and had astonishing destructive power. Lin Tian stopped. Golden light flickered around his body. With a bang, he shattered the dozens of hurricanes pressing down on him. He lowered his head and looked underground. The dragon veins on the soles of his feet surged and shook slightly. Rings of dragon veins scattered into the ground. Roar! A violent roar came from underground. For a moment, the entire mountain range trembled. In all directions, all the demonic mist floated over and turned into a huge skull. It roared at Lin Tian, and then tried to devour Lin Tian. Lin Tian raised his hand and grabbed this huge skull. Exerting a little force, he directly shattered it into pieces. The demonic veins intertwined. You have only just condensed your consciousness and are only comparable to the Great Path Realm. You want to devour me? He said indifferently. As he spoke, he stepped on the ground with his right foot. It shook again, causing the ground to roar again. In the next moment, the ground crumbled inch by inch. Dozens of huge cracks appeared. A mass of black demonic light rushed out from the cracks and turned into a demonic shadow. Its eyes were blood-red, and they were intertwined with bloodlust, cruelty, and mercilessness. This demonic shadow roared at Lin Tian. Demonic light surged like waves toward Lin Tian, turning into many beast shadows. These beast shadows were completely formed by the demonic light of the demonic shadow. They were just killing weapons that the demonic shadow had evolved. They did not have any consciousness. At this moment, they rushed fiercely toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian did not move. The golden light around his body turned into a wave of air and blasted out, instantly wiping out all the beast shadows. The demonic shadow roared and stared at Lin Tian. Its eyes were filled with coldness and greed. It roared again, causing the entire mountain range to shake even more violently. Beams of demonic light rushed up and entered its body, causing it to grow to dozens of feet tall in the blink of an eye. It roared again and opened its black demonic mouth. It swooped down and mercilessly tried to devour Lin Tian. Lin Tian looked up. The light of dragon patterns intertwined in his eyes. You want to take my body? He shook his right hand, and a golden sword aura rushed up. It directly shattered the greater void and split the endless demonic light. It shook the demonic shadow out, and it rolled on the ground in a sorry state. He took a step forward. The dragon patterns on the soles of his feet spread. With a bang, he once again shook the demonic light and sent it flying. The demonic shadow trembled in the distance. There was some fear in its eyes. However, in the next moment, it roared again. It grabbed a demonic vein from the ground and wrapped it around its body, causing its aura to surge. It pounced toward Lin Tian again. Boom! For a time, the space here began to shake. Lin Tian's expression was calm. Golden divine light spread out from his body and turned into divine swords that rushed up, all of them clanging loudly. Back then, Ao Jiantianzun found a place where 10 demonic veins gathered. A demonic soul with spiritual intelligence was born there. He couldn't bear to kill it, so he left behind the heavenly sword manual. He hoped that after the demonic soul practiced the manual, it would be able to remove its ferocity and violence and leave behind a kind heart. Unfortunately, he failed. He raised his hand. The sound of the sword was ear-piercing. The golden sword aura rushed up and pierced through the space. It swept the demonic shadow away again. It seems that even if I imitate the sage and leave you behind, your ferocity and violence will not be removed. In the future, when you grow up, you will become a great disaster. So, you will be buried here. Clang! A 3-foot-long golden sword gathered above his head. It shattered the endless demonic light and slashed down mightily. The demonic shadow's eyes finally showed fear. It immediately dove into the ground and fled downwards. Lin Tian moved his right leg. The dragon pattern spread and shook the demonic shadow out of the ground. Then, the golden sword aura slashed down at the right time and crushed the demonic shadow on the spot. For a moment, the black demonic fog in this place dissipated. The air was not as stuffy as before. Lin Tian glanced at the place where the demonic shadow disappeared. He did not stop and continued to walk forward. Not long after, he stepped out of the short mountain range. After dozens of breaths, he came to the depths of this space. In front of him, on a small stone platform, a ball of 7-colored divine light lay quietly as if it was in a deep sleep. Lin Tian's eyes showed a hint of surprise. He stepped over and appeared beside the ball of 7-colored divine light. Almost at the moment he came beside it, the ball of 7-colored divine light seemed to have sensed him. It shook slightly and then slowly rose into the air. The divine light it emitted became much stronger. Buzz! Strands of 7-colored light intertwined. The aura of the same substance and origin made the divine sword in Lin Tian's sea of consciousness shake. Lin Tian stretched out his right hand. The ball of 7-colored divine light immediately flew over. Just like before, it circled around him and instantly entered his body. It rushed to the divine sword in his sea of consciousness and merged with it. Suddenly, the divine sword shook. Strands of 7-colored light intertwined and drowned the divine sword in it. At the same time, the 7-colored light spread in all directions as if it was feedback. It surged out of the sea of consciousness and entered Lin Tian's body. It rushed to every corner of his body. There was an extremely pure and rich spiritual energy contained in it. Lin Tian's eyes flashed. Without hesitation, he immediately activated the Heart Sutra of Sun and seriously refined the divine light. Buzz! For a moment, there was a faint 7-colored light overflowing from the surface of his body. His aura and principle were both strengthening. He stood quietly in this space without moving. Only his tyrannical divine sense surrounded his body to prevent any ferocious beasts from attacking at this time. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. On this day, the 7-colored divine light outside his body disappeared and turned back into golden light. His aura became stable. The peak of the 3rd heaven of the Great Path. He opened his eyes. His eyes were intertwined. At this time, he felt that his physical body, divine sense, and principle of the Great Path had improved a lot compared to 3 days ago. He took a deep breath and scanned the bottom of his sea of consciousness. He saw that the divine sword had already calmed down and was motionless. The 7-colored divine light outside the sword had been completely absorbed. The patterns on the surface of the sword had become clearer and brighter. He looked at these patterns seriously. He studied them for 6 hours. I still don't understand, he muttered to himself. The patterns on the divine sword were too complicated. He racked his brains but still couldn't understand. In the end, he could only shake his head. He paused here for a moment. Without stopping, he turned and walked out. He had obtained the sword's soul fragment here. He was ready to rush to the immortal mansion world. He went back the way he came. Not long after, he stepped out of this space and reappeared in the outside world. He looked toward the south. Even though it was far away, he could still see the space portal of the immortal mansion world. There was spiritual light around it. The immortal mansion world! He narrowed his eyes slightly and strode over at an extremely fast speed. Boom! At this moment, thousands of feet away, a shocking divine power surged out. There was a blazing light of the sun. It was powerful and vast, shattering a large part of the void. Chapter 867. Lin Tian couldn't have been mistaken. The light of the sun was intertwined with the unique aura of the sun physique. His eyes flashed, and he changed direction. He didn't move very quickly, but stepped in that direction step by step. Boom! The blazing sun became even more intense. In the next moment, there seemed to be a spatial spirit domain breaking open in that direction. A figure soared up. His body was intertwined with the blazing sun, causing the surrounding space to distort. It was a tall figure with a majestic aura, like a god descending to the mortal world. The aura around him was very oppressive. Li Guhuang! Lin Tian's eyes shot out two cold beams of light that were almost solid. They were like two beams of killing light that slashed forward. He had heard from Yang Qi that Li Guhuang was also in this heaven, and was known as the Sun King of the Central Region. However, he had never met him. He didn't expect to see him now. He seemed to have just come out of seclusion in one of the ancient ruins of the spirit domain. In the distance, Li Guhuang turned his head to look. His black hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes were deep. After seeing Lin Tian, a strange look flashed in his eyes, but it quickly turned cold. "It's you!" His voice was very cold, and his killing intent surged instantly. He didn't hide it at all. Lin Tian now stood straight, and his black hair danced in front of his forehead. His eyes were incomparably cold. He took a step forward and directly punched out. Boom! It was as if a sacred drum had been beaten in the sky. The void directly exploded, unable to withstand the power of this fist. He and Li Guhuang had nothing to say. Li Guhuang's eyes burned like divine suns. He waved his palm, and the Li clan's god hand covered the sky and the sun, and met Lin Tian. Boom! For a time, the surrounding space began to collapse, unable to withstand the collision of the two. Lin Tian's eyes flashed coldly. Li Guhuang had become stronger, and had reached the 7th layer of the Great Tao, which surprised him. Back in the battle in the Bai clan, he was at the 4th layer of the Imperial Sky Realm, and Li Guhuang was at the peak of the 7th layer, more than 3 levels higher than him. Now, a few years had passed, and he had broken through continuously. His luck was excellent, and he had reached the peak of the 3rd layer of the Great Tao. However, Li Guhuang was not weaker than him. Now, he was still more than 3 levels higher. However, he didn't care much about this. The coldness in his eyes thickened, and he directly used the divinatory divine technique. Buzz! The Sea of 3 Leaves, 9 Springs Sacred Sword, Desolate Mountain, Divine Weapon Treasure Bell, Blood Crevice, and other divine elephant of heaven appeared at the first moment, sealing off every inch of space in all directions, and majestically charged forward. Li Guhuang's eyes flashed like lightning. Clearly, he had nothing to say to Lin Tian. Countless swords appeared behind him, each of them exuding a might that could annihilate everything. This was one of the 3 core divine abilities of the Li clan, the godly spirit 10,000 killing sword. Clang! 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 The killing swords clanged like real swords. They cut through the space and sunk the earth, heading toward Lin Tiansha. This was a shocking scene. As far as the eye could see, the dense killing swords and divine images collided, causing the space to explode. Spatial turbulence continued to pour out. Lin Tian's black hair danced. He took a step forward and punched again. Boom! This punch was much more powerful than the first one. It was unstoppable and destroyed everything in its path. At the same time, his left hand formed a seal, and a seal of 4 symbols appeared, pressing toward his opponent. Suddenly, the seal of 4 symbols condensed 2 Tao diagrams of the 4 symbols, as if to suppress and seal everything. Even the flow of the air was greatly affected, and it stopped for a moment. Boom! This was a combination attack. Lin Tian's momentum was vigorous, like an ancient emperor, and the spirit he exuded was frighteningly strong. Li Guhuang's eyes were cold, and he looked calm. A halberd of divine light rushed out from behind him. It was also a great magic of the Li family, and it rushed toward Lin Tian. Then, in the next moment, a prehistoric pagoda rushed out from behind him. The pagoda was 33 levels high, and it flowed with exquisite light. This was a core magic of the Li family, and it was slightly stronger than the Divine Spirit 10,000 killing sword. It was indestructible, and its attack power was extremely strong. Lin Tian shook his fist and directly destroyed it. However, in the next moment, the pagoda condensed again and turned into a ball of light. It evolved into 33 levels of heaven and pressed toward him again, and its momentum was stronger. "You think the same technique will work on me a second time?" he said coldly. This magic was called the Trayastrimsa Divine Light Pagoda. Back then, it had forced him into a difficult situation, but now it was impossible for him to be the same as before. At this moment, the Tao diagram of the 4 symbols that he took out trembled slightly. Using his current cultivation, he immediately cut off the connection between the Trayastrimsa Divine Light Pagoda and Li Guhuang, directly shattering it, and it would never be able to reappear again. He stepped forward, and a divine sword flew out from his body. He held it in his hand and waved it out 99 sword lights. With a clang, the sword lights of the Trayastrimsa Divine Light Pagoda's killing power was astonishing. 99 sword lights merged together and attacked from all directions. Crack! 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 Crisp sounds kept coming out, and the void was distorted. In an instant, the 99 sword lights of the Trayastrimsa Divine Light Pagoda pierced into a hornet's nest. This scene was a little frightening. The 99 sword lights of the Trayastrimsa Divine Light Pagoda were extremely powerful. They pierced through the void and trapped Li Guhuang in it. They were either aimed at his glabella, his heart, or his origin in his abdomen. Li Guhuang was not in a hurry. With a light shout, he unleashed the Li family's wheel of grinding deity devouring Tao. Instantly, a treasure wheel appeared. The surroundings were intertwined with a shocking aura of destruction, as if it could obliterate everything. At the same time, a light rushed out from his body and turned into a clay pot. The Tao patterns on it intertwined, and the power of a divine weapon was instantly revealed. "I will kill you today!" His words were cold. With a boom, the clay pot shone brightly as if it could swallow everything. It pressed forward together with the wheel of grinding deity devouring Tao. "I will take your head. Today, no one can protect you like before," Lin Tianling said. The divine sword in his hand flowed with divine light, and the clanging sound was endless. Once again, he slashed out dense sword lights of the Trayastrimsa Divine Light Pagoda. Then, he took a step forward in the midst of the sword lights and threw the divine sword in his hand at Li Guhuang. It turned into a destructive lightning bolt, and went straight for Li Guhuang's glabella. After that, he moved up with the sky full of sword lights. He waved his iron fist mercilessly, and directly smashed the wheel of grinding deity devouring Tao into pieces. Li Guhuang used the clay pot to sprinkle divine light all over the sky, blocking the dense sword lights that Lin Tian slashed out. At the same time, he waved the hand of gods and knocked away the divine sword that Lin Tian threw out. However, at this time, Lin Tian stepped on the yin and yang ho and approached him. He directly punched his opponent's chest. Li Guhuang's eyes were cold. A treasure cauldron appeared. It was a powerful divine power. At this moment, it protected his body and blocked Lin Tian's punch. Boom! He controlled the clay pot to fall from the sky, and in the blink of an eye, it pressed down on Lin Tian's head. Lin Tian did not dodge. He withdrew his iron fist and punched at Li Guhuang again. He slammed hard on the divine power treasure cauldron outside of Li Guhuang's body, causing cracks to appear on the cauldron. At the same time, a second divine sword rushed out of his body. The blood-red killing light intertwined and flew up into the sky. It collided with the clay pot that Li Guhuang pressed down on, exploding into destructive light. It was also at this time that Lin Tian's third punch landed. With a crack, it directly shattered the divine power treasure cauldron outside of Li Guhuang's body. "I'll send you flying!" he said coldly. The fourth punch was thrown out at extreme speed and landed directly on Li Guhuang's chest. With a bang, Li Guhuang was sent flying. A large mountain in the distance collapsed and was buried under the huge rocks that filled the sky. However, this was only for a moment. In the next moment, the huge rocks in the sky collapsed, and Li Guhuang rushed out. His body was covered by the divine power treasure cauldron, and he was not injured at all. Lin Tian's eyes narrowed. His punches were very fast just now, but Li Guhuang's casting speed was obviously not slower than his punches. In such a hurried gap, he actually used the protective divine power again and blocked his punch. He snorted coldly and stepped forward again. The two divine swords were activated together, and the killing light that filled the sky was slashed down. There were no complicated movements. He was still swinging his fists. His fists were simple and unadorned, but the power was terrifying. Boom! With a boom, the space shook violently. This punch was even stronger. It condensed 90% of his physical strength. It was really not a joke. Everything in front of him was disintegrated in an instant. Li Guhuang's eyes were like swords. He shouted in a low voice and supported an even stronger divine power to meet it. Suddenly, the two collided again. For a moment, the sky was filled with divine light that drowned out all directions and covered everything. Crack! 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 At this moment, the space shattered, and the ground sank. The scene was very shocking. The two charged in the sky full of divine power. Spells, divine powers, fist radiance, leg shadows, and divine weapons kept colliding. Sword of Heaven conquering! These four words came out of Lin Tian's mouth and resounded through the sky. With a clang, the destructive sword intent bloomed like a flower and crushed everything in an instant. Li Guhuang supported the great technique of the Li family and used the power of the divine weapon to meet it head-on. Boom! The two collided, and more cracks appeared on the ground. The space shattered and recovered, and then shattered again. With a bang, Li Guhuang's figure was hit out of the sky full of divine light. A transparent bloody hole appeared in his chest, and cracks spread all over his body. It made his body like porcelain, as if it would shatter with a gentle touch. In the next moment, Lin Tian stepped out of the sky full of divine light. A divine sword floated above his head, and he held it in his right hand. He only took 2 steps and appeared about 10 feet away from Li Guhuang. The two divine swords intertwined with divine light and slashed down at the same time. With a clang, the two divine swords had not really landed, but the sharp sword power directly shattered everything around them. However, in the next moment, Lin Tian's expression changed slightly. He stopped the attack of the two divine swords and moved dozens of feet away with extreme speed. Boom! Almost at the moment he moved out, with Li Guhuang as the center, the ground within a radius of 15 feet collapsed. Dense and blazing sword radiance rushed up, intertwining with extremely terrifying fluctuations. It directly melted the void, and the scene was terrifying. Suddenly, Lin Tian's expression changed. This was not only because the sword radiance was terrifying, but also because the sword radiance was mixed with an aura that he was very familiar with. It's similar to the Heart Sutra of Sun. Chapter 868. The blazing sword light interweaved around Li Guhuang, causing Lin Tian's expression to change. He clearly felt an aura that was very similar to the Sun Heart Sutra, causing his heart to tremble. He stared at Li Guhuang with a cold gaze. With a slight movement, the sword light of the heavens slashed out dozens of times. Li Guhuang's eyes were cold. His injuries were healed, and the blazing celestial swords beside him trembled, instantly meeting the attack. Boom! The power of these blazing celestial swords was terrifying, and their destructive power was shocking. The scorching heat was even more terrifying than lava, as if it had evolved from the blazing sun, as if it could melt everything in the world. It was enough to make the hearts of all living things tremble. Lin Tian's sword light of the heavens collided with the blazing sword light and quickly dimmed, as if all of its power had been sucked out, or as if it had been melted. It quickly dissipated, like a flame that had been extinguished. Whoosh! 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 Li Guhuang's blazing sword light rushed past, melting the space, and continued to slash towards Lin Tian without slowing down. Lin Tian once again unleashed his towering heaven sword light, clashing against Li Guhuang's sword light. However, Li Guhuang's sword light was truly terrifying, as though it could melt everything. Lin Tian's towering heaven sword light continued to weaken, and so did his other innate techniques. With a boom, Li Guhuang stepped over, carrying the blazing sword light that filled the sky. At the same time, he used the Hand of Gods to attack. Lin Tian waved the Bai family's supreme divine palm, colliding with it. At the same time, he slashed with the divine sword, dodging the blazing sword light. His gaze was cold. As he fought against Li Guhuang, he also dealt with Li Guhuang's blazing sword light. He felt more and more similar to the Sun Heart Sutra. In his cold eyes, the light became more and more intense. With a boom, he supported the Bai family's great celestial king arcane art and slashed out a heavenly sword light, retreating horizontally from the blazing sword light. You received some inheritance from the Sun Celestial Lord? He stared coldly at Li Guhuang. A bright light flashed in Li Guhuang's eyes as the blazing sword light around him grew even stronger. It was as though it wanted to incinerate everything and slash apart the heavens and earth. With just a slight movement, it melted and crushed everything as it mightily slashed towards Lin Tian. Lin Tian's great celestial king arcane technique instantly dimmed, and he was forced to retreat. He used the divining divine technique to summon a sea of clover and waited for the divining divine elephant to meet Li Guhuang's attack. However, the result was the same. The originally powerful divine technique quickly dimmed after meeting the blazing sword light slashed by Li Guhuang, as if the power within it had been weakened. Chi! A blazing sword ray brushed past his shoulder. Instantly, blood gushed out, and he felt a burning pain. Li Guhuang took a step forward, the sun and flames intertwining around his body. Blazing sword rays appeared beside him, making him look like a true sun god, high and unapproachable. Sun Immortal Sword, able to dissolve divine power. All of your techniques will be greatly weakened until you die. His voice was very cold. His right hand trembled, and a large amount of blazing sword rays pressed towards Lin Tian. Lin Tian's eyes were cold. He retreated and slashed out a large expanse of sword light. It is indeed the Sun Celestial Lord's divine technique, he said coldly. Previously, when he sensed the blazing sword light, he felt that its aura was very similar to the aura of the Sun Heart Sutra. He guessed that Li Guhuang had received part of the Sun Celestial Lord's inheritance, and some of his divine techniques. In fact, it was just as he thought. Li Guhuang's eyes were extremely cold. He took a step forward, and the Sun Celestial Sword that filled the sky made the sword power even more terrifying. It melted the great void and mercilessly slashed towards Lin Tian like a rain of swords. Clang! 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 His whole body was intertwined with blazing sunlight. The blazing sword light was even more terrifying. It slashed vertically and horizontally like a group of flame sword warriors under his command. Everywhere it passed, it was really suppressed. Even the air was melted. Lin Tian used the divination divine technique to create many divine techniques to attack. However, after meeting the Sun Celestial Sword, the power of the divine techniques was greatly weakened. They were quickly shattered by the Sun Celestial Sword, and the divine sword of absolute death closed in on him again. With a poof, a sword light pierced through his left shoulder, immediately bringing a large amount of blood with it. It was a bit glaring. He flashed back. With a shake of his right hand, he used the divination divine technique to spread out the blood-colored crack and swallowed it forward. At the same time, he unleashed a few other great divine abilities of the Bai family to attack from different angles. However, these divine techniques together could not last for long. In the blink of an eye, they were shattered. The Sun Celestial Sword can cut divine power and weaken it. All your divine techniques are manifested with divine power as the foundation. Under the Sun Celestial Sword, they are weaker and weaker. You can't stop me. Li Guhuang's voice was cold. He stepped forward, and a large number of Sun Celestial swords slashed at Lin Tian like a waterfall. Under the Sun Celestial swords, the void kept shattering. At the same time, it was as if water was boiling. The scene was very terrifying and gave people a sense of horror. Lin Tian retreated 3 feet away, his expression unchanged. "Can't stop you? I've never thought of stopping you. Today, I'm going to kill you," he said coldly. With a boom, a majestic aura came out of his body. He activated the Sun Heart Sutra, and golden divine light filled the field. Then, he waved his sword again. The golden sword light surged up and collided with the dense Sun Celestial swords in an instant. The 2 powerful sword lights collided, sending out bursts of sparks. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the Sun Celestial swords were shattered. Li Guhuang's expression changed as he stared at the golden divine light outside Lin Tian's body. His expression changed immediately. Unfortunately, I also know a bit of the Sun Celestial Lord's technique. Even more unfortunately, I control the Mother Sutra of the Heart Sutra. Your Sun Celestial swords can weaken the divine power, but they can't weaken the divine power that I use after activating the Sun Heart Sutra," Lin Tianling said coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, with a clang, he activated the Sun Heart Sutra even faster. Once again, he slashed out dense sword lights. Sizzling sounds kept coming out. In the blink of an eye, the Sun Celestial swords outside Li Guhuang's body were completely shattered. Poof! 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 3 streaks of sword radiance pierced through the air and pierced through Li Guhuang's body, leaving behind 3 glaring bloody holes. The divine light outside Lin Tian's body was like a rainbow. The divine sword in his right hand vibrated. In an instant, the sword whistled again, and golden sword lights filled the sky. Clang! The tyrannical sword was as fast as a startled swan. Once again, it penetrated Li Guhuang's body and forced him to retreat dozens of feet. Li Guhuang growled. The dense Sun Celestial swords condensed again in the blink of an eye, and became stronger. Half of the sword lights were like divine soldiers guarding him, while the other half mercilessly slashed toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian's eyes were indifferent. He stepped on the yin and yang hua to dodge, and then opened a path with the golden sword lights. Clang! The golden sword lights could no longer be weakened by the Sun Celestial swords. The fierce power was unstoppable, cutting everything into pieces. With a poof, Li Guhuang was penetrated again. Blood splattered in the void, and his whole body flew dozens of feet away. Lin Tian's eyes were cold. Naturally, he wouldn't give Li Guhuang any time to breathe. He quickly closed in, leaving afterimages behind. He wielded the blood-colored divine sword in his right hand and slashed the sword lights. The golden sword lights destroyed everything. At the same time, he formed a seal with his left hand. The seal of alchemy flame, the seal of refining fire, and the seal of burning heart were cast one after another. They mercilessly pressed down on Li Guhuang. With a boom, the space shook violently and collapsed. It couldn't withstand such divine power at all. Li Guhuang was shrouded in such a destructive divine power. Blood flowed from his mouth, but his eyes were colder than before. "Sun Fusang!" he shouted in a deep voice. The sunlight outside his body flickered, and a huge old tree appeared, enveloping him. This old tree was completely condensed by divine power. Its branches swayed, and there was a faint ancient aura that emerged. It blocked all of Lin Tian's attacks. Fusang tree? Lin Tian was shocked. He knew that the tree shadow that Li Guhuang was holding up was a type of defensive divine art. It should also be Celestial Venerable Sun's technique. The old tree's branches and leaves were lush and strong. Even though it was manifested by divine power, it was still vivid and had a majestic atmosphere. It was exactly the same as the Fusang tree described in the legends. He still vaguely remembered that in the legends, the Fusang tree was the sacred tree of the Golden Crow clan. It had great power. The Solar Lord manifested this tree's shadow as a defensive magic. Could it be that this legendary divine tree really exists? He frowned slightly. But in the next moment, he didn't think about it anymore. He took a step forward again and pressed on toward Li Guhuang. With a clang this time, he brandished a powerful sword move. The sword of soaring heaven slashed toward Li Guhuang like a comet slashing the moon. This sword move was the sword of slaughter in the soaring heaven sword manual. It was equivalent to a secret magic that could destroy almost everything. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of Li Guhuang and slashed down fiercely, bursting out a sky full of divine light. However, when the light dissipated, Lin Tian was shocked. This powerful sword move was still blocked by the old tree outside Li Guhuang's body. It's much stronger than the treasured cauldron defense magic from before. The difference is like heaven and earth. He was slightly shocked. He brandished the divine sword in his hand. At the same time, he used the weapon control art to activate the blood-red divine sword from a distance. He kept attacking Li Guhuang. For a moment, the golden soaring heaven sword radiance sealed the space and covered everything. However, the Fusang tree's shadow outside Li Guhuang's body was too strong. It completely blocked his soaring heaven sword radiance. His eyes narrowed. He slashed another soaring heaven sword killing technique. At the same time, he performed other secret magic attacks. However, they were all useless. They were all blocked by the Fusang tree's shadow outside Li Guhuang's body. It was also at this time that his body suddenly shook. He felt great danger for no reason. His soul in his sea of consciousness shook violently, and a gust of cold air appeared on his back. Broken tomb of the fallen gods! A cold voice came out from Li Guhuang's mouth. Chapter 869. The sudden change made Lin Tian's face change color. He endured the pain in his head and quickly stepped back, putting some distance between him and Li Guhuang. My divine will has turned into the god-shattering seed. It has broken into your mind. You can't get rid of it. Li Guhuang's eyes were cold. The Fusang tree gradually disappeared into his body. He stepped forward and took out the Taiyang deity sword again, pressing it mercilessly toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian endured the pain in his head and forced himself to use the heavenly sword aura. He slashed forward and stepped on the yin and yang hua to step back again. At the same time, he shouted and all the divine weapons in his body were activated. Each of them flashed with a strange light and killed tens of thousands of divine weapons. These were the divine weapons that he had activated with the art of weapon control. The combined power of several divine weapons was naturally terrifying. It forced Li Guhuang to step back and stop him from getting closer. It doesn't matter. The shattered tomb of the gods has been planted in your mind. Even if I don't get close to you, I can still crush your divine soul and kill you, Li Guhuang said coldly. He stopped approaching and used his divine will to activate the shattered tomb of the gods. Suddenly, his glabella lit up. Lin Tian suddenly felt more pain in his head. Blood flowed out of his mouth, nose, and ears. He stepped back again and again, and his mind felt like it was going to explode. He clenched his teeth and activated all kinds of divine abilities. He tried to cut off Li Guhuang's divine technique, but it was useless. There was an extremely terrifying energy interweaving in his sea of consciousness. It was as terrifying as the heavenly tribulation. With your mind as a burial ground for your divine soul, you can't stop it. It's only a matter of time before your divine soul is destroyed, Li Guhuang said emotionlessly. It had to be said that this sex-shattered divine tomb's secret technique was extremely terrifying, comparable to heavenly venerable divine techniques. Lin Tian only felt his soul tremble intensely, producing streaks of cracks. No matter what methods he used, it was useless, unable to block out that type of killing force. Blood seeped out from his mouth, nose, and ears. His head felt like it was about to explode. The divination divine art, for a symbol seal, psyche sea anomaly, and many other secret arts were unleashed one after another to suppress his body. Instantly, the pain was alleviated, and his psyche stabilized a little. A strange light flashed in Li Guhuang's eyes. He was very clear on how powerful the innate technique he was using was. Once he planted the god-shattering seed into his opponent's sea of consciousness, he would be able to kill his opponent in an instant. However, Lin Tian was able to hold on for so long. Not only that, at this moment, he seemed to have suppressed the innate technique slightly, causing Li Guhuang's expression to turn even colder. He stared at Lin Tian with an indifferent expression. He formed another seal with his hands and sent out more of his divine sense to activate the secret technique of the shattered tomb of the gods. For a moment, the light of the divine sense covered the entire area like a hazy sea of light. Lin Tiandao's body trembled. His psyche sea was instantly thrown into turmoil. More blood seeped out from his mouth and nose. Even his cheeks started to crack. Streams of blood seeped out from them. Inside, in his psyche sea, his psyche body seemed to be imprisoned by divine threads. It was difficult for him to move, and an even more shocking pain came from it. It was unbearable for ordinary people. He shouted in a low voice. In his psyche sea, boundless divine sense surged and turned into heavenly swords that slashed out, stirring up the clouds. However, it was still unable to block out the invisible force. Instead, he coughed out another mouthful of blood. It's useless. I told you that my divine sense has turned into the god-shattering seed and has been planted in your psyche sea. You can't break it. Li Guhuang's voice was emotionless. Lin Tian stared at him. Even though his head was in pain and his cheeks were covered in cracks, he did not show much emotion. In this world, there is no technique that can't be broken, he said coldly. With a buzzing sound, the reincarnation diagram appeared. The aura of the gods and saints intertwined and circled in the air, shining brightly. Even someone as strong as Li Guhuang was slightly shocked at this moment. He immediately felt the terror of the reincarnation diagram. This is Buzz! The reincarnation diagram shone brightly. In the next moment, it turned into a ray of light and rushed directly into Lin Tian's psyche sea. It appeared beside his psyche and completely enveloped his psyche body. In an instant, Lin Tian saw a strand of divine sense that did not belong to him intertwining beside his psyche body. It was like a fierce ghost that was eating and cutting his psyche body. There was no doubt that this was Li Guhuang's divine sense. It was the god-shattering seed that Li Guhuang had condensed with his own divine sense. His eyes were cold. With a thought, the reincarnation diagram shone even brighter, emitting a strange light in his psyche sea. It smashed down on Li Guhuang's divine sense and shattered it instantly. After that, his psyche sea shook. Many images appeared in his psyche sea. They seemed to be Li Guhuang's memories. In these images, Li Guhuang and a group of important figures of the Li family were discussing something in a secret hall of the Li family. They all had cold smiles on their faces. The extreme yin and extreme yang gave birth to the chaos offspring, destroyed the extreme yin body's consciousness, turned it into a puppet, annihilated the Bai family, and the Li family dominated the 10 directions celestial domains. His expression changed. He gritted his teeth and said the contents of the images that appeared in his psyche sea. His murderous intent soared instantly. Once, the Bai family and the Li family wanted to form a marriage alliance. If the extreme yin body and extreme yang body combined, they could give birth to a chaos offspring. Once the chaos body matured, it could definitely enter the chaotic realm and live for 100,000 years. It could allow the two families to look down on the 10 directions celestial domains for at least 100,000 years. However, he didn't expect the Li family to have such a plan. They wanted to quietly wipe out Bai Qiu's consciousness after the marriage alliance was successful and turn him into a puppet. After the chaos body was born, they would secretly destroy the Bai family. Then, the chaos offspring would belong to the Li family. Only the Li family could look down on the 10 directions celestial domains. The Li family is so calculative. His voice was extremely chilling. With a boom, golden light shot out from his body and turned into a beam of light that pierced through the sky. Li Guhuang was slightly moved. How did you know this? Boom! Monstrous murderous intent surged. With a bang, Li Guhuang was sent flying. He crashed into a mountain in the distance, causing the entire array to shatter. Lin Tian's black hair danced in the wind, and his entire body was intertwined with blood-colored tribulation lightning. His gaze was terrifying, like a god of death that had descended to the mortal world. "I'll kill you today. When I return to the second heaven, the Li family will completely disappear." His voice was cold. He took a step forward and instantly appeared in the mountain that Li Guhuang had crashed into. He punched down hard, and the golden fist light intertwined with the blood-colored tribulation lightning, penetrating the ground and creating a huge pit with a diameter of 80 feet. Whoosh! Smoke and dust billowed as Li Guhuang rushed up. His entire body was stained with blood, and he looked extremely disheveled. There was a blazing sun and a divine ocean behind him. He used the sun ocean of the king's territory to protect his body, but he was still severely injured and his king body was almost shattered. Lin Tian's eyes were cold. With a buzz, the reincarnation body rose again and pressed towards Li Guhuang. He was extremely fast, and the reincarnation diagram was even more dazzling. It immediately covered all directions and pressed down mercilessly. Li Guhuang hollered and pushed the sun ocean of the king's territory to the limit. The divine sun seemed to be able to obliterate everything. In the blink of an eye, the sun ocean and the reincarnation diagram collided, and the destructive aura shook like a rolling ocean. Pisht! With a soft sound, the sun ocean shattered on the spot. Lin Tian dashed past, and his golden iron fist crushed a large area of the void. It was an incomparably violent fist aura. Even someone as powerful as Li Guhuang was shocked. He once again propped up the sun ocean divine ability, and protected his body firmly in it. Almost at the instant that he propped up the Fusang tree's shadow, Lin Tian's fist landed like a blazing sun. Boom! With a crisp sound, it was earth-shattering, and the sturdy Fusang tree's shadow shook violently this time, causing dense cracks to appear. Although Li Guhuang used the Fusang tree to block Lin Tian's fist outside his body, he did not completely isolate Lin Tian's fist aura. Wisps of fist power entered through the Fusang tree and landed on his body, causing him to cough up blood and be sent flying. You boom! Lin Tian's golden iron fist arrived once again. It was as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It really had the power of hundreds of millions of caddies. It crushed the greater void and once again landed on the Fusang tree's shadow that Li Guhuang propped up. Pfft! More cracks appeared on the Fusang tree. Li Guhuang was sent flying again. He was shaken by Lin Tian's terrifying fist aura until he coughed up large amounts of blood. Solar Celestial Sword! He roared. Suddenly, the solar celestial sword appeared all over the sky. It was incomparably blazing, as if it was going to melt everything. 3 styles of Lin Tian! Almost at the same time, a cold voice sounded from Lin Tian's mouth. With a crack, the void collapsed inch by inch. Lin Tian activated the blood-colored divine sword and slashed down a peerless sword aura. This sword aura flashed and jumped. In the blink of an eye, it landed on the Fusang tree's shadow outside Li Guhuang's body. The destructive power was overwhelming. Pfft! This sword pierced through the Fusang tree's shadow and sank into Li Guhuang's left shoulder. Lin Tian's black hair fluttered in the wind. After this sword, the third punch landed. The golden fist aura covered all directions. With a crack, this time, the sturdy Fusang tree's shadow could no longer hold on, and was directly blasted into pieces. It's your turn to attack! Lin Tian stared at Li Guhuang. There were no other unnecessary movements. It was still a punch. It was like a meteor that could destroy the world. Li Guhuang supported 11 great magical powers in a row to meet the attack, but it was useless. In the blink of an eye, they were crushed by Lin Tian's fist aura. The golden fist landed firmly on his chest and blasted him into pieces on the spot. Immediately, in the next moment, an ear-piercing sword sound rang out. The heavenly sword aura manifested into thousands of sword auras and slashed down crazily. Lin Tian's eyes were as cold as ice. He naturally knew that it was impossible to kill Li Guhuang with a single punch. At this moment, he directly scattered the dense heavenly sword aura, completely enveloping the surrounding space, not giving Li Guhuang the slightest chance to reassemble his body. Pfft! 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 Under the heavenly sword aura, Li Guhuang's body, which had already been shattered into pieces, exploded one after another. Red blood splattered everywhere. Looking from afar, this scene was a bit horrifying. The dense heavenly sword aura sealed off the surrounding area and completely covered Li Guhuang's broken body. It was like a ruthless rainstorm that crushed down mercilessly. It was appalling. Nirvana of the sun! Chapter 870. Lin Tian's eyes were cold, and the murderous intent in his chest was terrifying. But even so, as he stared at Li Guhuang, who had reconstructed his body, a hint of surprise still flashed in his eyes. One should know that Li Guhuang shouldn't have been able to reconstruct his body with his towering heaven sword aura. However, not only did he reconstruct his body, but the speed at which he reconstructed his body was a bit exaggerated. It was almost done in the blink of an eye, as if it didn't take any time at all. He stared at Li Guhuang with cold eyes. At this time, he could only think of the 5 words that Li Guhuang had just roared. Sun Nirvana Technique, he said coldly. As he spat out these 5 words, he had already guessed something in his heart. This so-called Sun Nirvana Technique was obviously the inherited magic of the Solar Celestial Lord. It was a healing saint technique. Just now, Li Guhuang was able to reconstruct his body in the sky full of towering heaven sword aura and reconstruct it at an unnatural speed because of this Zhong Wushuang's saint technique. Staring at Li Guhuang, his eyes were cold. His right hand shook, and the towering heaven sword aura became denser and stronger. I'll crush you! His eyes were cold, and his murderous intent was overflowing. After the towering heaven sword aura that filled the sky, he stepped forward and blasted out a punch. With a dong sound, the dome of heaven trembled as if a thunderbolt had exploded. The violent might of the fist was about to shatter the heavens and split the earth. Puff! His speed was extremely fast, and the power of his fist was even more frightening. In an instant, Li Guhuang was blasted into pieces again. Blood sputtered all over the sky, dyeing the void red. Hum! The blood-red flame flickered, and Li Guhuang's broken flesh and blood seemed to have a mind of their own. Spiritual light surged, and he instantly reconstructed his body at an astonishing speed. Lin Tian roared, and the Taiyang celestial sword rushed toward Lin Tian. At the same time, the Taiyang ocean was propped up by him. The divine ocean's blue waves and the scorching sun surged toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian's eyes were ice cold. He took a step forward and raised the reincarnation diagram. His divine and holy aura immediately covered the entire area. This was his king's region, the strongest king's region. In addition, his murderous intent was strong at the moment. After he activated the reincarnation diagram, he immediately shattered Li Guhuang's sun ocean. At the same time, he shattered the Taiyang celestial sword and directly crushed Li Guhuang. Pooh! Li Guhuang's body exploded apart once more, and he was forcefully crushed into an expanse of dazzling bloody mist by the samsara diagram. Buzz! Lin Tian's glabella lit up. Not giving Li Guhuang any chance to resist, he directly brought out the yin-yang lotus sea. For a moment, the light of yin and yang intertwined. He used this strange phenomenon in his knowledge sea to suppress Li Guhuang's blood mist and soul. Rebirth of the sun! With a low roar, the bloody mist that was formed after Li Guhuang's body exploded danced with blood-red flames and instantly reformed. Its speed was beyond common sense, as if it did not need to waste any time at all. Lin Tian's eyes were cold as ice. With a low shout, the yin-yang lotus sea transformed into a yin-yang great sword and mercilessly chopped down. Pooh! Li Guhuang's body exploded again, and blood splattered everywhere. However, what surprised Lin Tian was that the speed at which Li Guhuang reformed his body was too fast. In the blink of an eye, he once again condensed the sun physique. It was really like a sun that was constantly being reborn. The cold light in his eyes grew stronger. With a wave of his right hand, a blood-red divine sword appeared in his hand. He stepped forward and slashed at Li Guhuang. Boom! Li Guhuang shouted. The glabella shone brightly, and an ancient tree suddenly rushed out from behind him. This ancient tree was divided into 9 branches, and on each branch stood a golden raven, all of which contained an incomparably powerful aura. Then, the Sun Ocean also propped up immediately. The two merged together, and the will of destruction instantly skyrocketed. Then, he rushed in front of Lin Tian like a bolt of lightning, completely ignoring Lin Tian's killing light of the divine sword. He only attacked Lin Tian with a sky full of killing light. Pooh! Pooh! Blood splattered everywhere, and the bodies of the two exploded at the same time, dyeing the sky red. Lin Tian wrapped the incomplete body with his divine soul light, and quickly reformed half of his body. However, at this moment, his expression changed slightly. The blood-red flames on Li Guhuang's body flickered. He had already reformed his complete body and was charging toward him. Lin Tian's expression was cold. His half-reformed body instantly bloomed with infinite light, and he quickly retreated. At this moment, he knew what Li Guhuang was planning. Li Guhuang had mastered a healing sacred art like the Sun Nirvana technique, which could repair the broken body at an extraordinary speed. Therefore, Li Guhuang ignored his attack and was going to destroy his body at the expense of both sides. He knew very well that his opponent wanted to destroy his physical body before he could reconstruct his physical body. This was because the one who could reconstruct his physical body first would have the upper hand in the battle and could forcefully stop his opponent from reconstructing his physical body. He quickly repaired his body as he retreated. Li Guhuang's body had already been reformed. He took a step forward, and the Sun Ocean and the 9 golden ravens appeared again. This time, Lin Tian seemed to be in a passive position. His half-reformed body was directly smashed into pieces. He used the power of his divine soul to roll up his broken body and retreat, quickly reforming his body. "It's useless. I won't give you a chance." Li Guhuang's voice was emotionless. Under the pressure of the sun, Lin Tian's flesh exploded again with a pu sound. Clang! 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 The sound of the sword was ear-piercing. Li Guhuang took out the Sun Immortal Sword. Dense and blazing sword rays were like the sword rain that Lin Tian had slashed out before. They quickly pressed toward Lin Tian. For a moment, Lin Tian's broken body was constantly crushed, and he looked even more miserable. Boom! Divine power surged. Not far away, the divine weapons that Lin Tian had taken out before moved. They were controlled by Lin Tian with his mind. At this moment, they rushed over and pressed toward Li Guhuang, buying him enough time to reform his body. He reformed his body. His eyes were cold. The reincarnation diagram and the yin-yang lotus sea appeared together and pressed toward Li Guhuang. Poof! The reincarnation diagram collapsed the Sun Ocean, and the yin-yang lotus sea crushed the 9 golden ravens. He appeared beside Li Guhuang, grabbed a blood-red divine sword, and slashed it down, cutting it into pieces. Li Guhuang's broken body jumped with blood-red flames and reformed in the blink of an eye. With a low roar, he attacked Lin Tian again. This time, he supported the Sun Mulberry's superpower and the Sun Immortal Sword's superpower together. Together, their power skyrocketed. Lin Tian's eyes were full of murderous intent, but he had to admit that Li Guhuang's Sun Nirvana technique was very troublesome. With this same technique protecting his body, the speed at which he reformed his body was too fast. He almost had a real indestructible body. Boom! Li Guhuang rushed over at this moment. His expression was cold, and he used all kinds of superpower and secret techniques. His killing power was shocking. Just like before, he completely abandoned defense and focused all his divine power and consciousness on attacking. The power was really terrifying. In the blink of an eye, Lin Tian's arm was crushed. However, at the same time, Lin Tian's heaven-piercing sword also slashed Li Guhuang's head, cutting his body into pieces again. The blood-red flames flickered. Li Guhuang instantly reformed his body, and with the sun god fire in the sky, he pressed down mercilessly. With the Sun Nirvana technique protecting my body, I can be reborn continuously and be eternal. In the end, you can only die in my hands. Li Guhuang's voice was emotionless. With a boom, the sunlight surged. Li Guhuang supported all kinds of superpower. He abandoned defense and attacked Lin Tian again. Eternal and indestructible? What a joke! There is nothing in this world that is eternal and indestructible. If I say I will kill you, you will definitely die. Lin Tian's voice was even more ruthless. Li Guhuang was indeed very powerful with the Sun Nirvana technique protecting his body. In a battle of the same level, he was almost invincible, but it was very troublesome to be reborn continuously. At this moment, his expression did not change, but a ray of silver light flashed in his eyes. With a low roar, the divine power in his body skyrocketed. He directly faced Li Guhuang, and the divine light covered all directions. Boom! 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 The two of them kept colliding, and the void collapsed and the sky cracked. Strands of spatial turbulence kept pouring out. Poof! Poof! Blood splattered. Li Guhuang's body was completely shattered, and half of Lin Tian's body was shattered. Their blood stained the void. The blood-red flames flickered. Li Guhuang instantly reformed his body, and like a ray of sunlight, he charged at Lin Tian. I said that with the Sun Nirvana technique protecting my body, I can be eternal and indestructible. You won't have the slightest chance in this battle, Li Guhuang said coldly. The sun was blazing. The solar celestial sword and many of the Li family's great magical powers appeared together, and the 9 golden crows also appeared. Lin Tian's body had not been reformed when Li Guhuang suppressed him, but his expression did not change at all. Only a cold light flashed in his eyes. In the next moment, with a boom, he shattered his own physical body. At the same time, a violent blood-chi power sputtered out, turning into a destructive wave that drowned Li Guhuang, who was charging over and blasted his physical body into pieces. Li Guhuang's broken body flickered with blood-red flames. Wisps of spiritual light rolled, and his body was about to reform. Boom! Suddenly, Lin Tian's flesh and blood surged like a wave. He did not gather together. Instead, he directly engulfed Li Guhuang's body, using the mist of blood and flesh to cover Li Guhuang's shattered body. You want to stop me from reforming my body with this? It's useless, Li Guhuang said coldly. The blood-red flames flickered and became more vigorous. His broken body was shining. Even if Lin Tian's blood mist and broken body covered it, it was not of much use. Buzz! Right at this moment, numerous sealing runes suddenly appeared in this space. They were secretly engraved by Lin Tian during his battle with Li Guhuang. At this moment, they manifested, transforming into chains of light that sealed the surrounding space. With a series of popping sounds, they directly pierced through Li Guhuang's flesh and blood, forcefully locking him in the void, forcefully interfering with his regeneration of his body. At the same time, Lin Tian's broken body and blood mist shone brightly at this time. The golden divine light illuminated all directions. He quickly activated the Sun Heart Sutra under the condition of his broken body. It was not to protect himself, but to use the golden divine light of the ancient sutra to cover himself and Li Guhuang's broken body in blood mist. Then, his spirit also emitted a bright spirit light. At this moment, it directly attacked Li Guhuang's spirit and ruthlessly attacked. For a time, the two people's spirits collided, and balls of astonishing spirit light erupted on the spot. Chapter 871. Golden divine light illuminated the surroundings, emitting from the heart of the Sun Sutra. It enveloped Lin Tian's and Li Guhuang's shattered flesh and divine soul. At this moment, Lin Tian's divine soul ruthlessly attacked Li Guhuang's divine soul, clashing madly with it. You want to steal my technique? Don't even think about it, Li Guhuang roared. With a boom, the blood-red flames flickered. Wisps of flames rushed up, and his shattered flesh emitted endless light. You can't reassemble! Lin Tian's cold voice rang out. Clatter, 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 the imprisonment runes turned into chains of light, sealing off the surroundings. Together with Lin Tian's own flesh and blood, they forcibly imprisoned Li Guhuang's shattered body. Most importantly, the heart of the Sun Sutra emitted the most dazzling golden light, forcibly suppressing the pulsating blood-red flames outside Li Guhuang's shattered body, forcibly interrupting Li Guhuang's reassembly. 1. His divine soul emitted endless light, intertwining with Li Guang's divine soul. With the golden divine light as a guide, it pulled at the nirvana of the Sun Sutra that was engraved in Li Guang's divine soul. Runes jumped out one after another, flashing with divine light. Damn it! Li Guang roared in anger. The origin of the sun trembled, emitting rays of the Sun Sutra's radiance that could burn all things. Lin Tian's flesh and blood trembled, but then, a ray of light that was even stronger than the origin of the sun surged out. The origin of reincarnation trembled, like a vast ocean surging up, directly suppressing the origin of the Sun Sutra's radiance. You! Boom! The golden divine radiance became even stronger. Lin Tian's spirit trembled as he continuously clashed with Li Guang's spirit, drawing out even more runic Dao seals. Those were the runes of the art of Sun Nirvana. He quickly memorized them in his soul body with the light of his spirit. It was extremely difficult to forcibly seize someone else's technique. However, unfortunately, the nirvana of the sun that Li Guang had mastered was the technique of Lord Solar, while he had mastered the Heart Sutra of the Sun. This ancient sutra could be said to be the source of many of Lord Solar's great techniques. He used the Heart Sutra of the Sun to support it, and then relied on his shattered flesh and blood to suppress Li Guang. He used his spiritual soul that had survived 2 heavenly tribulations in a row to crash into Li Guang's spiritual soul, which greatly reduced the difficulty of seizing the technique. He forcibly extracted the profound essence of this saint technique from Li Guang's spiritual soul. Of course, with his current strength, even if he had a Mother Sutra like the Sun Heart Sutra, he could only barely compete for a divine power. After all, Li Guang was very powerful, and he had the Sun King physique, which was not something an ordinary cultivator could compare to. 1. Using the memory of his divine soul, he extracted the runes and Dao seals from Li Guang's divine soul. His shattered flesh began to glow with strange lights, and blood-red flames danced on his body, causing his shattered body to attract the endless spiritual lights around him. Li Guang was furious. He couldn't bear to be forcefully seized by Lin Tian like this. He shook the origin of the sun and circulated the nirvana of the sun even faster. The surging blood-red flames jumped violently, causing the formation patterns carved by Lin Tian to creak. Boom! Lin Tian's shattered flesh glowed, and the origin of reincarnation blazed, once again suppressing Li Guang's origin of the sun. At the same time, his spiritual soul became even more powerful. After surviving 2 heavenly tribulations in a row, it was incomparably sturdy. At this moment, under the support of the Heart Sutra of the Sun, a vast and immortal spiritual energy was released, and more profound essence of the nirvana of the sun was drawn out from Li Guang's spiritual soul. He quickly memorized it with the light of his spiritual soul, and at the same time, he evolved it in his spiritual soul. Li Guang roared, "Damn it! Get lost!" In response, Lin Tianji snorted coldly, "I'm going to get this same technique." His voice was cold. Both of them were in a state of fragmentation, and they were in a stalemate in the void. After an unknown amount of time, Li Guang roared and used all his means. He finally broke the confinement formation patterns, and collapsed Lin Tian's flesh and soul, and reformed his physical body in the distance. Lin Tian! He was extremely furious, and killing intent surged in his eyes. The mighty Sun Ocean and the 9 golden crows cruelly charged towards Lin Tiansha. In the distance, Lin Tianling snorted. With a buzz, blood-red flames jumped, and he reformed his physical body in an instant. He raised his golden fist and punched forward. Boom! The powerful punch was unparalleled. It shattered the 9 golden crows, broke the Sun Ocean, and landed on Li Guang's chest, shattering him into pieces. Li Guang reformed his physical body in an instant. His killing intent was like the sea, and all kinds of magical powers and secret techniques were displayed, shattering the sky. This was a terrifying power that seemed to be able to destroy everything, like a sun that was about to burn the world. Lin Tian's eyes were also cold. He took a step forward, and the divination divine technique, the 4-symbol seal, the reincarnation diagram, and the spiritual sea's vision were displayed one by one. They gathered together and pressed down on Li Guang. Boom! 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 The battle between the two was shocking to the extreme, shattering expanse after expanse of space and shattering the earth. Divine light covered everything. Poof! Poof! A moment later, the two of them exploded at the same time, and blood stained the void. Then, the same blood-red flames jumped outside their shattered bodies, and they reformed their physical bodies in the blink of an eye. The anger in Li Guhuang's eyes was terrifying. This was the precious technique he found, and it could give him an absolute advantage and initiative in battle. But now it was taken away by Lin Tian, and he also learned this Zone Wushuang's same technique. Great magical power! Lin Tian's eyes were intertwined with light. He stared at Li Guhuang and took a step forward. He had just obtained the sun's nirvana technique and had only temporarily cultivated and evolved it, but he was already shocked by this same technique. It could be said to be extremely amazing. It was definitely a healing sane technique. Simply put, although cultivators of the great Tao realm and above could reconstruct their bodies, the process of reconstructing would take some time. Moreover, every time they reconstructed their bodies, they would consume their own blood and qi. But this sun's nirvana technique did not need to do that. Not only could it infinitely shorten the time it took to reconstruct the body, but it also did not consume any blood and qi at all. It only required divine power and spiritual qi. It could be said that with this same technique's protection, in a battle between cultivators of the same level, one could be considered to have an indestructible body. They would be in an invincible position. Very good! He pressed down on Li Guhuang, and all kinds of spells and magical powers were displayed, covering the sky. Li Guhuang was furious. His black hair stood on end, and all kinds of killing lights appeared at the same time, suppressing all directions. Lin Tian did not dodge or evade. He pressed forward. Just like Li Guhuang before, he ignored all of Li Guhuang's attacks and allowed them to fall on his body. Before his body exploded, he pressed the killing light on Li Guhuang's body. Puff! Puff! Both of their bodies exploded at the same time again, and blood stained the void. With a rumble, blood-red flames flickered around their bodies. They used the same technique to quickly reconstruct their bodies. But this time, Lin Tian was faster. Before Li Guhuang could reconstruct his body, he slashed with the blood-red divine sword. Although it's the same technique, I still have the Sun's Heart Sutra. Lin Tian's voice was emotionless. Both he and Li Guhuang now had the Sun's Nirvana technique to protect their bodies, but he also had the Sun Lord's Heart Sutra. So, his son's Nirvana technique was now more powerful than Li Guhuang's. Clang! He shook the divine sword and mercilessly slashed out the 3 moves of Lin Tian. The destructive sword instantly closed in on Li Guhuang. With a puff, more than half of Li Guhuang's reconstructed body was directly smashed into pieces. He let out a roar and relied on the sun's Nirvana technique to quickly reconstruct his body. But only halfway through the reconstruction, Lin Tian's Heaven's Nirvana killing light pressed down again. Let me see what other life-saving techniques you have. Lin Tian's eyes were cold. He waved the Heaven's Nirvana sword and pressed down like a rain of swords, mercilessly attacking Li Guhuang. Puff! 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 Again and again, Li Guhuang's body continued to shatter. It was a shocking sight. Li Guhuang roared, and the light of his shattered body shone brightly. A violent wave of the Great Path emerged and turned into a destructive solar storm. It swept Lin Tian into it, and instantly shattered Lin Tian's body. The Great Path's precepts surged wildly. The Great Path of the Sun? Lin Tian's cold voice rang out. He recognized Li Guhuang's precepts. It was the Great Path of the Sun, one of the top 10 of the 3,000 Great Paths. He was not surprised by this. After all, Li Guhuang had the Sun King physique and was extremely talented. It was natural for him to be able to comprehend the Great Path of the Sun. The blood-red flames flickered, and he instantly reconstructed his body. At the same time, he propped up his Great Path's precepts. For a moment, his nameless Great Path's precepts collided with Li Guhuang's Great Path of the Sun. The two collided violently, bursting out balls of destructive light. This destructive light rushed out in all directions, shattering everything and creating streaks of spatial turbulence. Boom! Li Guang also reconstructed his body, and his control of the great path of the sun had obviously reached an extremely profound level. With this great path's precepts, he collided wildly with Lin Tian's nameless great path's precepts. The two did not give way to each other. After that, more than 100 breaths passed in the blink of an eye. The two of them exchanged great path's precepts and collided with magical powers. Each of them was constantly injured by the other, and their faces turned pale. Then, after dozens of breaths passed, the two of them exerted their full strength. In the end, Lin Tian's great path's precepts won and crushed Li Guhuang's great path's precepts. Li Guhuang was shocked and angry. You! He could not believe it. The great path he controlled was the great path of the sun, which was ranked 6th among the 3,000 great paths. Moreover, he was now at the 7th heaven of the great path. He activated the precepts of the great path of the sun with his cultivation at the 7th heaven of the great path, but he was actually defeated by Lin Tian's nameless great path, which was activated at the peak of the 3rd heaven of the great path. It actually crushed his great path of the sun. Boom! The corners of Lin Tian's mouth were stained with blood, and his clothes were dyed red. He took a step forward, and with the nameless great path that seemed to destroy the galaxy, it flooded towards Li Guhuang. With a poof, Li Guhuang was directly crushed. He was miserable and sorrowful, and his blood splattered all over the sky. Roar! He let out an angry roar, and the blood-red flames flickered. He reconstructed his great path of the sun with the nirvana of the sun technique. In the distance, he activated the great path of the sun again. At the same time, he propped up the sun ocean and the 9 golden crows in his sea of consciousness, and directly merged them. Kill! He let out a loud roar, and the destructive storm formed by the fusion of the great path of the sun, the king's territory, and the sea of consciousness rushed towards Lin Tianxia. All of a sudden, wherever he passed, the space collapsed in patches, unable to withstand such a murderous power at all. Lin Tianling humped and formed a seal with both hands, directly propping up the reincarnation diagram of the king's territory. Afterwards, his nameless great path's precepts surged upwards and fused with the reincarnation diagram, erupting with a ball of dazzling light that made the reincarnation diagram even more vast. This was his strongest combat power and strongest divine art. Great Tao Reincarnation Diagram. It's over, Li Guhuang. You must die today. Chapter 872. The diagram of the reincarnation of the Great Tao was formed from the fusion of Lin Tian's King's region and his nameless Great Tao. Various patterns interweaved on it, and it shone with dazzling and resplendent light, causing it to be vast like a starry sky. With a bang, the Great Path reincarnation diagram only shook slightly, and it directly annihilated everything. Lin Tian's body was like lightning, and his entire body was dazzling with golden light. Holding the reincarnation diagram, he took a step towards Li Guhuang, who was charging over. Die! Li Guhuang roared, and the black hair on his head stood up. Several kinds of magical powers condensed into a blazing sun at this moment. This blazing sun was like a real sun that had been plucked out. It was vast and mighty, and the aura of burning the world was extremely terrifying. Lin Tian's eyes were very emotionless. He was indifferent to this terrifying blazing sun, and only suppressed it with the Great Path reincarnation diagram. Boom! The two hadn't really collided yet, but divine light danced in the surroundings. The void within 100 feet was instantly shattered. In the next moment, there was a continuous sizzling sound. Lin Tian's Great Path reincarnation diagram was like a sacred diagram that opened the heavens. It came down mightily and finally collided with the blazing sun that Li Guhuang had created with various great techniques. For a moment, heaven and earth shook. With the two as the center, wisps of lightning appeared nearby. The scene was terrifying. Poof! Poof! In the collision of the peak, the aura of destruction interweaved. Both of them had an arm shattered, and blood splattered all over the sky. However, the aura of destruction that the two of them exuded became even more terrifying. Neither of them recovered their physical bodies. At this moment, they put all their power into destruction. Poof! Poof! The bloody mist exploded again. Under the intense collision, the destructive power overflowed, causing both of them to shatter half of their bodies. As far as the eye could see, electric arcs interweaved in the void. Li Guhuang fused several methods to form a blazing sun. Lin Tian's nameless Great Path and the reincarnation diagram fused into the Great Path reincarnation diagram. The two of them collided. One retreated, one advanced, one retreated. They directly entered the final tug of war between life and death. The aura of destruction turned into gusts of violent wind and waves that swept out in all directions. Crack! 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 At this moment, with the two of them at the center, the earth began to crumble, continuously collapsing and sinking. Sand swept through the heavens. At the same time, cracks continuously appeared on the two people's damaged bodies. Blood flowed out, and their appearances became extremely miserable. This stalemate lasted for dozens of breaths in the blink of an eye. It's time to end this. I have the Sun King physique. With the power of the sun, I'll turn you into ashes. Li Guhuang roared at this moment. As he finished speaking, there was a boom. He directly burned a wisp of the source of the sun. His entire aura soared. The vast aura of destruction seemed to have turned into a great river. It instantly suppressed Lin Tian's reincarnation diagram of the Great Path. Die! He let out a low roar and pushed the burning sun of destruction, which had been strengthened by the power he had obtained by burning a wisp of the sun origin, towards Lin Tian. Lin Tian's mouth was overflowing with blood, and his body was even more battered. However, his eyes were emotionless, and his black hair danced wildly in the wind. In terms of physique, do you think you can compare to me? His voice was cold. With a buzz, he was just as decisive. He directly burned a wisp of the reincarnation diagram of the sun origin, causing his aura to soar in an instant. Immediately, in the next moment, the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path emitted an even more dazzling light. There were even wisps of blood-colored lightning that rushed out of Lin Tian's damaged body and directly entered the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path. Boom! For a moment, an even more terrifying divine might was vast and mighty. It instantly suppressed the burning sun of destruction that Li Guhuang had conjured. The might of the way was shocking. With a crack, a crisp and ear-piercing sound, a large crack appeared on the burning sun of destruction that Li Guhuang had conjured. Li Guhuang's expression changed. The power that he had obtained by burning a wisp of the sun origin was actually suppressed at this moment. Lin Tian's eyes were emotionless. With a low roar, he held the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path with a slight force and directly shattered the burning sun of destruction that Li Guhuang had conjured. With a bang, Li Guhuang was sent flying dozens of feet away. Li Guhuang steadied himself in the distance. He was both shocked and furious. Impossible! I have the king body, and I am at the seventh heaven of the Great Path. I control the Great Path of the sun. How can I lose to you? He stared at Lin Tian, unwilling to believe this result. At this moment, he couldn't help but roar. He no longer had his previous calm and indifference. I can't possibly lose. Boom! A vast divine might appeared. It was like a galaxy pressing down, shaking the sky and directly interrupting his next words. Lin Tian held the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path and closed in. With one hand holding the divine diagram, he pressed down mercilessly. Kill! The word kill resounded in this space. The power of the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path drowned out everything. With a poof, the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path fell. The light of the king's territory and the Great Path's precepts intersected and merged, directly crushing Li Guhuang's king body of the sun. It exploded into dazzling blood that filled the sky. Damn it! A furious roar sounded. Li Guhuang's divine soul was not destroyed. He used the nirvana of the sun to protect his body and quickly fled into the distance. You can't escape! Lin Tian's voice was very cold. With a thought, he directly threw the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path in his hand. With a poof, the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path pressed down on Li Guhuang's divine soul and directly crushed half of his soul. Li Guhuang roared. The remaining half of his divine soul turned into a dim light and fled into the distance again. At this moment, he knew that he had lost. There was no chance for him to turn the tables. He chose to escape rationally. Lin Tian's body was covered in blood. He used the nirvana of the sun, and his physical body instantly recovered. He chased after him. With a buzz, he pressed down with the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path again and enveloped Li Guhuang in the blink of an eye. Poof! Half of Li Guhuang's divine soul was crushed. His spiritual energy instantly became extremely scattered, like a wisp of flame that was about to be extinguished. He roared angrily. His soul struggled violently. The blood-red flames jumped, and the light of the sun danced. He forcibly broke free of a small wisp of his divine soul. Without any hesitation, he flew into the distance again. Lin Tian's face was emotionless. He spread out the yin-yang Tao and quickly chased after him. He had to admit that Li Guhuang was really strong. With just his divine soul, he actually resisted the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path twice in a row without being destroyed. This was very shocking. One had to know that this was his most powerful technique. Even a half-step enlightened divine soul would definitely be crushed into ashes by this attack. With a whoosh, his feet shook. He directly used the fifth level of the yin-yang Tao and instantly cut off Li Guhuang. Li Guhuang was shocked and angry. He quickly retreated and escaped again. I won't die here. I want to break into the 10th place. Boom! The power of the Great Path rolled, and the yin-yang lotus petals intertwined. The peerless power interrupted Li Guhuang's words again. At the same time, it sealed the space in all directions in an instant. Lin Tian's eyes were emotionless. The reincarnation diagram of the Great Path pressed down. At the same time, he also used the yin-yang lotus sea. Li Guhuang's face finally changed completely. The remaining wisp of his soul trembled. The feeling of death was extremely clear. You die! Lin Tian's voice was cold. The reincarnation diagram of the Great Path and the yin-yang lotus sea pressed down together and drowned Li Guhuang in an instant. With a poof, Li Guhuang screamed. Then, his voice disappeared. The last wisp of his soul was directly crushed. He was truly destroyed in body and soul. The divine light here was hazy. After a few breaths, it finally gradually dissipated and became clear again. Cough! Lin Tian's body trembled violently. He directly coughed out a mouthful of blood essence and almost fell from the sky. At this time, the reincarnation diagram of the Great Path collapsed on its own and dissipated into light. He landed on the ground shakily. Although he had won this battle by killing Li Guhuang, the injuries he suffered were also very serious. At this time, his divine power was almost exhausted. His internal organs were also full of cracks. It was difficult to heal quickly. He took a deep breath, and with a thought, he put away the divine weapons he had summoned before. Then, he dragged his seriously injured body, enduring the severe pain, and quickly walked towards a mountain not far away. He didn't dare to stay in this place for long. Because he is now in the chaotic fifth heaven. Killing and robbing can happen at any time. His current situation is very bad. Even an immortal realm expert can kill him. If he is discovered by other cultivators at this time, it is very likely to be a disaster. He must not be exposed to the vision of other cultivators at this time. Soon, dozens of breaths passed. He walked steadily into the mountain and found a relatively hidden cave. After sitting cross-legged in it, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. He thought about it for a while. This may be because the immortal mansion world in the central region has been opened. Many cultivators have rushed there, so there is no one nearby. He exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and didn't continue to think about it. The Great Sun Heart Sutra and the Great Sun Nirvana Technique were activated at the same time. The golden divine light and the blood-red flame jumped together, causing the surrounding spiritual energy to surge like waves. Buzz! In an instant, his injuries began to recover at a very astonishing speed, and the aura he exuded rose rapidly. This made his heart sink. Naturally, he knew that this was mainly the effect of the Great Sun Nirvana technique. The saint healing technique is well deserved, he muttered to himself in his heart. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged, and the golden divine light and the blood-red flame lingered on the surface of his body. Soon after, his blood, divine power, and divine sense all rose to the peak level. His injuries were all healed, and his divine power was fully restored. Good! He muttered in his heart, and continued to practice the Great Sun Nirvana technique. It wasn't until 3 days later that he stood up. In these 3 days, he carefully comprehended the Great Sun Nirvana technique, and his control of this technique has greatly improved. At this time, his clothes were still stained with blood. He used his divine power to erase the blood stains and restore them to their original state. Then, he clenched his fist slightly. He felt that his essence, qi, and spirit were slightly stronger than before the battle with Li Guang. His cultivation had also improved a little. It seemed that he could enter the fourth heaven of the Great Path at any time. This made him very satisfied. Looking back on this battle, not only did he kill a great enemy, but he also obtained a saint healing technique. His cultivation had also improved a little. It could be said that this was extraordinary. After a pause, his feet shook, and he directly stepped out of the cave. The Immortal Mansion World. It's time to find them. Chapter 873. Lin Tian was a little far from the Immortal Mansion World. He flew through the air, and after about 2 hours, he appeared outside the entrance to the Immortal Mansion World. Strands of sparkling spiritual light interweaved at the entrance, leaping about like celestial butterflies. Very extraordinary, he murmured. He paused for a moment. Without much hesitation, he directly stepped into the Immortal Mansion World. As soon as he entered the Immortal Mansion World, he immediately felt that the spiritual qi in the air had become much denser. There was a huge difference between this world and the outside world. He raised his head and looked around. This Immortal Mansion World was vast and boundless. The blue sky was brilliant, and white clouds drifted about. On the ground, there were many tall celestial mountains, as if many dragons were lying on the ground. It's like a small world. A flash of light flashed through his eyes. He paused for a moment, then walked forward. Not long after, the roars of demonic beasts rang out. A Balrog bear, a full 30 meters tall, stood up from a mountain and strode into the distance. Its body was shrouded in a pitch-black mist, and its aura was powerful and intimidating. Not far away, a large python was moving. It was like a small mountain, and Lin Tian couldn't help but open his mouth. It's definitely comparable to the Great Tao Tier. He was a little surprised. He had just entered the Immortal Mansion World, and was only at the edge, but he had already seen such a powerful vicious beast. He could imagine that there must be even more terrifying demonic beasts in the depths of this Immortal Mansion World. There was more than a 90% chance that there would be vicious beasts comparable to Wujin Tier. Ah! Not far away, a scream rang out. He turned his head and looked over. A group of cultivators were fighting over a huge immortal Lingjing. Their eyes were bloodshot, and there were already several cultivators lying in pools of blood. Lin Tian glanced at the immortal Lingjing, and was secretly surprised. This was because this immortal Lingjing was more than 10 kilograms, comparable to an ordinary Lingjing that was more than 100,000 kilograms. Its value was astonishing. This never-before-seen Immortal Mansion World really lives up to its reputation. This is only the edge, and there is already such a huge immortal Lingjing easily found, he muttered to himself. A group of cultivators were fighting over the immortal Lingjing not far away. He didn't pay much attention to this, and spread out his divine sense to search for Bai Qiu and the others. Not long after, he crossed 3 mountains in a row. Along the way, he found a few pieces of immortal Lingjing and dozens of pieces of ordinary Lingjing. The immortal Lingjing was more than 20 kilograms, and the ordinary Lingjing was more than 50 kilograms. Altogether, they were worth more than 200,000 kilograms of ordinary Lingjing. When he stepped into another mountain, there were many ancient trees in front of him. He saw a small squirrel lying weakly beside a small rock. Its fur was stained with blood, and he could faintly see a few sharp claw marks on its back. Lin Tian paused for a moment. He remembered that on the green peak of the second heaven's Wuji Gate, there was a group of small animals running around in the mountains. He fed them, and some of them were injured. He treated them, and they weren't afraid of him at all. Although after that, he knew that the group of small animals was formed by the Tao marks of divining divine technique, he still liked such small animals. At this moment, seeing a small squirrel so injured and dying, he naturally couldn't bear it, and walked over. When the small squirrel saw someone approaching, it was scared and wanted to escape, but because it was injured, it couldn't move at this time. It could only curl up pitifully and tremble. "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you." Lin Tian came to the small squirrel's side and poured his divine power into the small squirrel's wound. After looking at it, he couldn't help but smile. "Eagle claw marks, you escaped from the eagle claw? It seems that you're quite powerful." He only needed to glance at the wound on the little squirrel's back to know that the little squirrel had been injured by an eagle. The so-called formidable was naturally only applied to ordinary squirrels. After all, eagle-type creatures would typically only choose to pounce when they had an absolute chance of capturing or killing their target. For the little squirrel to be able to escape under such circumstances, it was indeed not simple. The little squirrel had only suffered superficial wounds. Under his divine power, it quickly recovered. Even the fur that had been scratched off grew back. Goo-goo! The small squirrel suddenly regained its strength and became very agile. After jumping around in a circle, it ran away, then ran back in the blink of an eye, holding a pine cone in its paws. It stood upright and handed it to Lin Tian, making a very crisp sound. Lin Tian was slightly moved, then he smiled. He could see that the small squirrel handed him the pine cone to thank him. "No need, you can keep it for yourself. Remember to be careful in the future." He rubbed the small squirrel's head, then turned and strode into the distance. After a few steps, he was out of this large mountain. After walking out of this large mountain, he continued forward. Along the way, he saw even more cultivators. Many of them were seriously searching in this immortal estate world. From time to time, someone would dig up Lingjing's treasured medicine, precious jade, and other things. Of course, after that, there was naturally no lack of fighting. He saw cultivators die tragically on the ground. Not far away, a half-step great Dao elite passed by the territory of a large ape, and was directly swallowed by the large ape. Lin Tian was not too far away from this large ape. At this time, the large ape seemed to have discovered him. With a fierce roar, a vast and mighty demonic aura surged over, and it reached out a beast's claw to grab Lin Tian. It was comparable to a great Dao elite. Lin Tian didn't even raise his head. With a slap, he sent this ferocious ape flying hundreds of feet away. It rolled into a large mountain and stopped moving. "Have those fellows already gone deeper into this immortal estate world?" he whispered to himself. His divine sense spread out, and he increased his speed a little. In the blink of an eye, he had crossed another 5 large mountains. At this moment, purple lightning flashed in a large mountain in front of him. At the same time, blinding saber light slashed out. Instantly, Lin Tian's eyes flickered. He was all too familiar with this lightning and saber light. They belonged to Bai Ziki and Yang Qi. "Found them," he said secretly. With a flash of the yin and yang scepter, he instantly strode over. Not long after, he crossed more than 10,000 feet and finally saw Bai Qiu, Bai Ziki, Yang Qi, and Wishing Crocodile. At this time, the 3 of them and the crocodile were surrounded by a group of people. There were more than 20 people surrounding them, and all kinds of divine abilities and precious techniques were pressing down on them. Moreover, 3 of them had divine weapons, and their cultivation was at the 9th heaven of the great Tao. Their battle prowess was astonishing. Boom! Clang! Bai Ziki propped up a sky full of lightning, and Yangqi slashed down densely with saber light. Both of them were very powerful, and each of them killed a person. On the other side, Bai Qiu scattered the power of Yin, and Wishing Crocodile used the Great Five Elements art. Each of them also killed a powerful enemy. At this time, the three of them and the crocodile had been fighting for an unknown amount of time. Their divine power and demonic power had been greatly exhausted. Meanwhile, there were more than a dozen corpses lying on the ground. All of them were intertwined with Tao laws. Clearly, they were all existences of the great Tao Tier when they were alive. You all must die today. After I kill you, the other bastard will also die. All of you will be buried together with the princess of my race. A cultivator at the 8th heaven of the great Tao said coldly. He stretched out a huge hand of laws, and grabbed at Bai Ziki mightily. With a rumble, the space in all directions trembled and shattered. It was as weak as dregs in front of this huge hand of laws. Bai Ziki's eyes intertwined with lightning as he stared at this 8th heaven of the great Tao expert. His gaze was very cold. Suddenly, his body was like an illusion, flashing and shattering. It was as if he had disappeared from this world. It was also as if he had used some kind of extreme speed movement technique. He directly avoided this 8th heaven of the great Tao expert's hand of laws, and in the next moment, appeared behind him. Poof! A bloody mist exploded. The 8th heaven of the great Tao expert's body collapsed. Even his divine soul didn't escape and was instantly destroyed. Not far away, Lin Tian's expression changed slightly, revealing a look of shock. In just an instant, Bai Ziki had killed an 8th heaven of the great Tao expert with his 2nd-tier great Tao cultivation. This kind of combat strength really surprised him. Most importantly, he didn't see Bai Ziki's attack trajectory clearly just now. He seems to have used some kind of great magical power, he muttered to himself. He immediately thought of something. Previously, this pig forcibly suppressed his cultivation, saying that he was cultivating some kind of secret technique. Just now, he must have used that technique. Boom! 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 In front of them, 3 vast divine powers surged, shaking the sky. More than 20 people stared at the 3 people and the crocodile. Their eyes were cold, and their murderous intent was undisguised. You were besieged by dozens of my clan's experts, but you still managed to kill so many of us. You little bastards are really not simple. However, you will all die today. Even the gods can't save you. One of the 3 9th heaven of the great Tao experts in the lead said coldly. Little bastards, you want to kill Lord Crocodile? You're not qualified. Damn you, if Lord Crocodile was still at the peak realm, I would have wiped out your clan with one slap. Wishing Crocodile scolded. Bai Qiu, Bai Ziki, and Yangqi looked at the 20-odd people warily. There was divine light intertwining around their bodies, but it wasn't as strong as usual. Clearly, they had exhausted too much of their divine power because of the long battle. Kill! On the periphery, another 9th heaven of the great Tao realm expert among the 20-odd great Tao experts spoke ruthlessly, his eyes cold. All of a sudden, more than 20 people moved, and the killing intent was terrifying. Boom! It was also at this moment that the void trembled, and a large part of it collapsed. Lin Tian stepped over at this moment, and his golden iron fist covered the sky, directly enveloping the 9th heaven of the great Tao expert, who shouted, Kill! The 9th heaven of the great Tao expert was shocked. Facing such a fist, he felt a chill run down his spine. You! Blood splattered, and the great Tao expert was smashed into pieces on the spot. Then, almost at the same time, the reincarnation diagram of the king's territory rushed out from behind Lin Tian, and the mighty and holy aura crushed over mercilessly, annihilating the divine soul of the great Tao expert. His current cultivation was only half a step away from reaching the 4th heaven of the great Tao, and his combat power was much stronger. The punch just now also contained all of his physical strength. Naturally, it shattered the 9th heaven of the great Tao expert with one blow, followed by the full power of the reincarnation diagram of the king's territory, directly obliterating his divine soul. For a moment, the other cultivators who were besieging the three people and the crocodile changed their expressions. When they saw Lin Tian's face clearly, the group of people was shocked again. "It's you! The direct murderer who killed our clan's princess!" one of the ninth heaven of the great Tao experts said coldly. When the three people and the crocodile saw Lin Tian appear, a glimmer of light flashed across their eyes, and Bai Qiu even revealed a hint of joy. "Brat Lin, you're finally here. This is Zhang Yuji's family. Damn it, you actually came down from the seventh heaven!" Chapter 874. Listening to Wishing Crocodile's words, Lin Tianwei nodded slightly. In fact, when he heard more than 20 people say to Bai Ziki and the others, "All of you will be buried with the princess of our family," he had already guessed that this group of people was from the Zhan family of the seventh heaven. "Zhan Yuji deserved to die, but your Zhan family is really amazing. You actually crossed the heavens to kill her." Lin Tian looked at the Zhan family and sneered. The Zhan family cultivators looked at Lin Tian coldly. Their eyes were filled with endless killing intent. Not long ago, Zhan Yuji's soul lamp extinguished, and the entire Zhan family turned upside down. One should know that Zhan Yuji is the pearl of the Zhan family, the most beautiful woman in the entire seventh heaven. Her aptitude is also extraordinary, but she was killed by someone. At that time, the Zhan family sent a large number of powerhouses to the fifth heaven. After arriving at this heaven, the Zhan family didn't even investigate who killed their princess. After all, the matter of Lin Tiansha killing Zhan Yuji has long been known by everyone in the fifth heaven. It's not a secret at all. Therefore, this group of Zhan family powerhouses immediately chased Lin Tianyi and the others in the fifth heaven. A few hours ago, they discovered Bai Qiu and the others and directly attacked them. "Our family has been at the top of the seventh heaven for countless years. Our inheritance has been passed down for countless years. How dare you kill the princess of our family?" One of them stared at Lin Tian and said viciously. "You should, you're really noisy," Lin Tiantan said coldly. With a bang, a vast divine might rushed out of his body, directly interrupting the cultivator's next words. The reincarnation diagram rushed out, and the aura of a supreme god rushed towards the cultivator at lightning speed. "Since you dare to come, all of you will die here," he said coldly. The power of the reincarnation diagram was astonishing. In a flash, the cultivator's head was instantly cut off, along with his divine soul. In an instant, the cultivators of the Zhan family were shocked and angry. "Kill him!" The eyes of the leading cultivator of the ninth heaven of the Great Path were full of anger. After he finished speaking, he personally took action. Carrying a divine weapon, he charged towards Lin Tian. This Zong divine weapon was a heavy hammer. It was covered with runes, and when it pressed down, it shattered a large area of space. Its killing power was shocking everyone. Lin Tian's expression was cold and indifferent. With a clang, a blood-colored divine sword rushed out of his body and furiously slashed upwards. Clang! The blood-colored divine sword collided with the heavy hammer, and immediately, a vast and mighty mist of destruction filled the sky. Under this destructive light, Lin Tianyi rushed through and came in front of this cultivator of the ninth heaven of the Great Path in an instant. He raised his golden fist, and the light of the fist immediately illuminated all directions. As soon as it landed, it crushed a large area of the void. This scene was a little frightening, causing the ninth heaven of the great Tao cultivator to feel a chill down his spine. When he thought of how Lin Tianyi had shattered another ninth heaven of the great Tao cultivator from his family, he immediately felt his heart palpitate. Myriad thoughts killing ring! This ninth heaven of the great path cultivator of the Zhan family roared and directly propped up a tyrannical great magical power. At the same time, he quickly retreated and widened the distance between him and Lin Tian. He was really fearful of Lin Tian's physical strength. With a boom, dense killing light appeared horizontally, and even intertwined with the power of the great path. It pressed down on Lin Tian like a river of stars. Lin Tian's expression did not change at all. His eyes were cold, and his golden fist pressed forward. This punch was still unleashed with his full strength. The terrifying fist force was unstoppable, and it directly shattered the great magical power of this ninth heaven of the great path cultivator of the Zhan family. Immediately, with a whoosh, he stepped on the fifth level of the yin and yang ho and once again approached his opponent. This ninth heaven of the great path cultivator's expression changed. He used his magical power again, and rays of killing light and protective light appeared together. Kill! He roared angrily, and his killing magical power pressed down on Lin Tian. At the same time, he shook his heavy hammer, causing it to emit even more terrifying killing power. Lin Tian snorted, and 5 rays of divine light rushed out of his body. They were all divine weapons. Together with the blood-colored divine sword that he had summoned at the beginning, the divine weapons of the 6 sects all shone brightly and pressed down on this ninth heaven of the great path cultivator of the Zhan family at the same time. Crack! 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 The void was cut into pieces. The divine weapons of the 6 sects combined were all pushed to the limit by Lin Tian. They instantly crushed the heavy hammer of the divine weapon and fell on the ninth heaven of the great path cultivator of the Zhan family. Suddenly, with a poof, this Zhan family cultivator exploded. Only a wisp of his spiritual soul was left, and it escaped in a sorry state. Die! The word die was heard, and it was cold and oppressive. Lin Tian propped up the reincarnation diagram again and pressed it down, directly crushing the spiritual soul of this ninth heaven of the great path cultivator. The process of this confrontation was too fast. It was like a wisp of yellow sand brushing past one's fingertips. It wasn't until Lin Tian had completely finished off this ninth heaven of the great path cultivator of the Zhan family that the other Zhan family cultivators came closer. They were shocked and angry. Damn it! 6. He controls the divine weapons of the 6 sects together? Don't be afraid. We have divine weapons too. Let's combine our powers and kill him together, an expert of the Zhan family said. Boom! At this moment, even stronger divine power rushed out from Lin Tian's body. The golden divine light swept out like a storm. With a bang, the strongest Zhan family cultivator was directly sent flying, coughing up blood in the distance. Buzz! Lin Tian's expression was cold. At this moment, with a thought, he directly manifested the nameless great path nomological laws. Then, it quickly merged with the reincarnation diagram of the king's territory, condensing into his strongest move, the reincarnation diagram of the great path. Without saying anything, he held the reincarnation diagram of the great path in his right hand and directly threw it at the Zhan family cultivators who were rushing over. In an instant, the space distorted and was annihilated. The terrifying power made everyone's expression change. Retreat! Don't take it head on! The last ninth heaven of the great path cultivator of the Zhan family shouted. After finishing his words, he immediately retreated. At the same time, the others also quickly retreated. At this moment, they all felt the terror of the reincarnation diagram of the great path. However, not only was the reincarnation diagram of the great path shocking, but its speed was also extremely fast. Although the Zhan family cultivators began to retreat immediately, there were still 6 people who were covered by it. Suddenly there were poof 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 sounds. The 6 great path cultivators of the Zhan family directly exploded, their bodies and souls destroyed. Such a scene made the other Zhan family cultivators even more shocked and angry. At the same time, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. You! The last ninth heaven of the great path cultivator stared at Lin Tian and the reincarnation diagram of the great path. His heart twitched violently. He only felt that this diagram could annihilate everything. Behind him, the 3 people and 1 crocodile were also slightly surprised. This guy's combat strength has increased a lot compared to before. His cultivation has already reached the peak of the 3rd heaven of the great path. Baiqiu was surprised. Let's not care about this now. Let's attack together and kill them, the wishing crocodile said. After saying that, it directly supported the great path of the demon clan and charged forward. Bai Ziki and Yang Qi both supported the strange phenomena in their seas of consciousness. With one step, they shook the entire greater void. The killing power was terrifying. 9 moons aligned pearls! Bai Qiu supported the strange phenomena in his seas of consciousness. 9 full moons appeared behind him. Each moon was incomparably holy and had astonishing power. Suddenly, the pressure on the Zhan family cultivators became even greater. Sacrifice to the precepts of the Great Path. The last 9th heaven of the Great Path cultivator roared. As he sacrificed the precepts of the Great Path, he frantically activated the divine weapon. The other Zhan family cultivators naturally did not hesitate. All of them gave it their all and helped to activate the divine weapons they brought. Boom! For a moment, rolling divine power rushed up again. More than a dozen people joined together. The precepts of the Great Path were like a destructive galaxy. Precepts of the Great Path? Only you have them? Wushan Crocodile sneered. He directly supported the Great 5 Elements art. The 5 Elements Tao powers of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth crazily rotated and suppressed. Bai Qiu, Bai Ziki, and Yang Qi also supported their own precepts of the Great Path. Although there was not much divine power left at this time, the power was still sharp and terrifying. Lin Tian was at the forefront. Holding the Great Path reincarnation portrait, she pressed against the last 9th heaven of the Great Path cultivator of the Zhan family. At the same time, she used the weapon control technique to control the divine weapons of the 6 sects, sending out beams of killing light. Boom! This kind of confrontation was a little scary. For a moment, this place was completely enveloped by a destructive light fog. This 9th heaven of the Great Path cultivator and Lin Tian continuously clashed for dozens of breaths. In the end, the Great Path reincarnation portrait and the 6 divine weapons shattered together. Then, Lin Tian released the yin-yang lotus sea and directly obliterated the cultivator's divine soul. Suddenly, the other Zhan family cultivators' expressions changed. Every one of them trembled. The 3 strongest people they had here, 3 9th heaven of the Great Path cultivators, were all killed by Lin Tian. Boom! Clang! Thunder and saber sounds intertwined. Bai Ziki and Yang Qi's methods were outstanding. Each of them killed a Great Path cultivator. Bai Qiu supported the vision in his sea of consciousness. Wushan Crocodile released the Great 5 Elements art. They were also very strong, and they crushed 2 people. At this time, of the dozens of Zhan family cultivators who came here, only 11 were left. Among these 11 people, the strongest was at the 8th heaven of the Great Path, and the weakest was at the 3rd heaven of the Great Path. But at this time, they were a little shocked and fearful. Lin Tian snorted. Holding the Great Path reincarnation portrait, he directly attacked. Poof! The Great Path reincarnation portrait shook and directly crushed one of the 8th heaven of the Great Path cultivators. Then, with the impact of the yin-yang lotus sea, this person's divine soul was completely obliterated. Clang! He used the divine sword to perform the 3 moves of Ling Tian in the Ling Tian sword manual. Sword light danced, and another person was destroyed. He rushed forward, his golden iron fist shaking the sky. Wrapped in the nameless Great Path law, he broke through all the divine powers and secret arts. Poof! A 5th heaven of the Great Path cultivator was crushed. Even his divine soul was destroyed by this punch. This kind of power was a little scary. In the end, the remaining 8 Zhan family cultivators all became really frightened. Then, in the next moment, they suddenly flew in different directions. They actually chose to escape at the same time. Want to escape? Lin Tianlin laughed. Chapter 875. The expressions of the 8 great Tao cultivators of the Zhan family all changed. Staring at the array patterns that appeared in the surrounding void, they couldn't help but tremble. These array patterns completely isolated the surrounding void. Kill them, Lin Tian said to Bai Ziki and the others. He directly stepped over, and the great Tao reincarnation diagram and the 6 divine weapons suppressed them together. When he came to this place and saw the 3 people and 1 crocodile fighting with the Jean family cultivators outside the battlefield, he secretly engraved a sealing array and a forbidden space array to prevent the aura here from leaking out, and also to prevent these Jean family cultivators from escaping. Kill them all! Whooshing Crocodile laughed, and the great 5 elements art crushed down mercilessly. Baiziki and the other 2 each took out their own tyrannical means, and 5 types of destructive power fell on the 8 Jean family cultivators. Suddenly, with a series of puffing sounds, 5 of the 8 were crushed into pieces, all of them destroyed in body and soul. You! The remaining 3 were shocked and frightened. Lin Tian shook the great Tao reincarnation diagram and directly pressed down, covering another Jean family cultivator and mercilessly killing him. Clang! The 6 divine weapons hummed as they were controlled by him with the weapon control technique. They majestically pressed towards the last 2 Jean family cultivators. With a puff sound, one of them was killed on the spot, while the other was slightly stronger. He managed to escape in a sorry state, saving his life under the attack of the 6 divine weapons. He stood not far away in a sorry state, gasping for breath. Lin Tian stepped forward, and the great Tao reincarnation diagram hovered above his head, making him look unapproachable. Your Jean family sent dozens of great Tao cultivators from the 7th heaven, each of them extraordinary strength, but now that all of them have died here, I wonder if the big shots of your family will feel distressed. The last Jean family cultivator was frightened by Lin Tian's strength, but he also knew that he couldn't escape death today. In horror, he stared viciously at Lin Tian. You, don't be complacent. If we all die in battle, the family will send stronger people, and there will be elders at the level of Wujin. At that time, all of you will die, none of you will live. As he spoke, this person roared loudly. Even though he knew that he was going to die, he still didn't want to wait for death. He activated a powerful divine ability. Lin Tian shook the diagram of the reincarnation of the Great Tao, directly crushing the opponent's theurgy. If your Jean clan dares to come, we'll just kill them all, he said casually. Lem. The Tao of reincarnation diagram flew by, and it obliterated the last person amidst an ear-piercing shrill cry. For a moment, the place became much quieter. With a thought, the diagram of the Great Path reincarnation dissipated, and the divine weapons of the 6 sects returned to his body. Then, he raised his hand and grabbed the divine weapons of the 2 sects from the Jean family. He erased the divine sense imprints on them and put them away. Kid, your strength has increased by quite a bit. The whooshing crocodile flapped its wings and flew over. Of course. Lin Tian smiled. Compared to when he was in the heavenly palace of death, his cultivation had improved a lot. Naturally, his strength had increased a lot. If you hadn't arrived in time, we would have been in big trouble, Baiqiu said. Dozens of great Tao powerhouses from the Jean clan rushed over, including 3 powerhouses at the 9th heavenly layer. With the support of divine weapons, the pressure on them wasn't small. If Lin Tian hadn't appeared in time, it would have been hard to say what the outcome would have been. Lin Tian nodded with a smile. He glanced at the corpses of the Jean family cultivators on the ground and said, Speaking of which, the strength of this branch is really strong. They can directly send dozens of great Tao masters to the 5th heaven. It seems that the number of great Tao masters in the Jean family is very high. Listening to his words, Bai Ziki and Yang Qi both nodded slightly. It's a very natural thing. Whooshing Crocodile was far more familiar with the strength of the major forces in the upper heavens than Lin Tian and the others. He said, As a top force in the 7th heaven, the Jean family naturally has a lot of great Tao cultivators in their clan, including many enlightened realm cultivators. They even have an early Nirvana realm ancestor overseeing the 7th heaven. Nirvana realm. Yang Qi frowned. The strength of a Nirvana realm powerhouse is very terrifying. What's so great about them? If they really provoke us, we can just ask the cute monster emperor to slap them and destroy them, Baiqiu muttered. Lin Tian, Baiziki, Yang Qi, Whooshing Crocodile. This girl is really violent. Relying too much on others is a taboo in cultivation. If you want to become stronger, you have to rely on yourself, Lin Tian said. It was rare for Bai Ziki to agree with his words. That's right. Next to him, Yang Qi also nodded in agreement. Bai Qiu curled her lips and rolled her eyes. Wishing Crocodile said at this time, Okay, let's ignore that dog fart Zhan family for now. It said to Lin Tian now. Previously, we found a treasure land, and there were amazing auspicious signs spitting out from the ground from time to time. There must be extraordinary treasures down there. At that time, the bastards of the Zhan family happened to kill us, so we sealed the place. Now, let's hurry over and use your dragon burial scripture to open the way and dig out the treasures down there. There might be a huge immortal spirit mine down there. As it said this, Wishing Crocodile's eyes lit up as if it had really seen a huge immortal spirit mine. It almost drooled. Lin Tian was slightly moved. He immediately removed the forbidden space formation and ceiling formation and left with the three people and the crocodile. Not long after, he followed the three people and the crocodile over 2 mountains and appeared in a depression. Then, after a few hundred feet, an invisible barrier appeared in front of them, suppressing all the auras in all directions. This is the place, Wishing Crocodile said. As it said this, it released the 5 elements Dao Law and opened the invisible barrier after a dozen breaths. Suddenly, multicolored light rushed up from the ground. Moreover, this multicolored light was intertwined with amazing spiritual energy, making the group feel comfortable. Lin Tian was slightly surprised. This multicolored light was extraordinary, and the quality of the spiritual energy it contained was very shocking. He paused, and the light of dragon patterns flowed in his eyes. Dragon patterns spread out from the soles of his feet and rushed down into the ground. Not long after, he revealed a strange expression. How is it, kid? Did you find anything? Did you find the treasures down there? Wishing Crocodile saw his expression and immediately asked. Not yet. Lin Tian shook his head and said, However, there are many intertwined earth vein primary lights below. What light? The three people and the crocodile did not understand. Earth vein primary lights. Lin Tian explained. This primary light is born from the veins of the earth. When it goes berserk, it will turn into a killing force that can kill a half-step enlightenment expert. When it's calm, it can be used for cultivation. It has miraculous effects. Hearing this, the three people and the crocodile immediately understood and were slightly moved. Then is it calm or berserk now? Bai Qiu asked. We're lucky. It's calm now, Lin Tian said. You guys back off a little. I'll use the dragon patterns to draw them out. Then we'll use them to cultivate. The three people and the crocodile nodded and each retreated several meters. They had absolute confidence in Lin Tian's mastery of the Earth Vein mountain range because Lin Tian possessed the dragon burial scripture. Lin Tian raised his hand, and so light intertwined between his fingers. He first set up 3 sealing formations around them to prevent the aura here from leaking out and being sensed by other cultivators. Then, he operated the dragon burial scripture and used the dragon patterns to draw the earth vein primary lights underground. Buzz! The dragon patterns under his feet were like a spider web. Then, in the next moment, rays of dim light suddenly rushed up. They live underground. Once they're drawn out, they'll dissipate quickly. Hurry up and absorb them. Lin Tian now. The three people and the crocodile nodded in unison and hurriedly operated their respective ancient scriptures to absorb the primary lights that rushed out. For a moment, the three people and the crocodile were all shocked. What strong spiritual energy! It's even purer than the origin vein essence chi! Wishing Crocodile was surprised. The energy contained in the earth vein primary lights that can kill a half-step enlightenment realm cultivator is naturally not weak. Lin Tian now. He used the dragon patterns to draw the earth vein primary lights up while absorbing the primary lights into his body to refine them. Next to his life origin, the little guy in the divine egg sensed the abundant spiritual energy, and immediately woke up. It let out a happy cry and absorbed the primary lights with Lin Tian, causing the patterns on the surface of the egg to become brighter. Buzz! Golden light flowed on the surface of Lin Tian's body. In the process of refining the primary lights, the aura he emitted gradually became stronger. At the same time, the dragon patterns under his feet became brighter and denser, quickly surging into the depths of the ground. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 breaths passed. At this time, the earth vein primary lights that lived underground had all been drawn out by Lin Tian's dragon patterns, causing the group to benefit greatly and their cultivation to improve greatly. It was also at this moment that Lin Tian's eyes flashed. He discovered the existence of natural spirit runes under the ground, and they were very dense. His dragon runes couldn't penetrate them, so he couldn't continue exploring. Only by using dragon runes at a close distance could he break through these natural spirit runes. Immediately, he mentioned this matter to the three people and the crocodile. Natural spirit patterns? This is good stuff. It has an extraordinary effect on cultivating divine abilities and secret techniques. Hurry up and go down, Wishing Crocodile said. Yes. That's right. Moreover, after the natural spirit patterns, it must be a super treasure. Baijiu clasped his hands. Lin Tian nodded, half-squatted, and placed his right hand on the ground. The dragon patterns turned into dragon swords and cut the ground. In the blink of an eye, a large pit appeared, and the soil below was still cracking. The group jumped in, and just like when they were digging for the source vein, they blocked and sealed the hole. Then, they followed behind Lin Tian and went all the way underground. After about an hour, they stopped. They were already 2,000 feet underground. At this time, light patterns appeared in front of them. They were perfectly compatible with the 10 directions Earth fall and were full of spirituality. They are indeed natural spirit patterns. Let's cultivate at the side first, and use them as support to comprehend each divine ability in depth, Wishing Crocodile said. Natural spirit patterns could help cultivators better understand the essence of various divine abilities. Lin Tian was not in a hurry to break the spirit patterns with dragon techniques. He sat down cross-legged at the side, closed his eyes, and silently evolved his own divine abilities in his sea of consciousness. Baijiu, Baiziki, Yang Qi, and Wishing Crocodile also sat cross-legged at the side. Faint light intertwined on the surface of their bodies. Obviously, they were all comprehending their own divine abilities and secret techniques. Soon, 6 hours passed. After 6 hours, the group opened their eyes one after another. Their essence, energy, and spirit had improved a little. Obviously, they had benefited a lot from comprehending divine abilities and secret techniques by relying on these spirit patterns. Okay. Now we can break these spirit patterns and see what treasures are behind them. Chapter 876. Lin Tian's body was intertwined with a faint golden glow, and dragon patterns flickered in his eyes. His cultivation had improved even more. Hearing Wishing Crocodile's words, he nodded slightly and formed a few dragon seals with his right hand. Then, he slowly pressed them toward the spirit runes in front of him. Chi! With a crisp sound, the natural spirit runes in front of him began to melt and disintegrate bit by bit like ice meeting fire. After about 10 breaths, the natural spirit runes completely dissipated, destroyed by Lin Tian's special dragon technique. Suddenly, an extremely rich fragrance wafted over, causing the 4 people and 1 crocodile to tremble. As far as the eye could see, there was a small puddle behind the natural spirit runes. The puddle was filled with a pure white viscous liquid that looked like brain matter. Wisps of immortal spirit light intertwined on it. Divine juice earth milk! Lin Tian was shocked. Baiziki and the others did not know what the so-called divine juice earth milk was, but they could feel that this liquid was extraordinary. The immortal spirit energy contained within was too rich, and it was many times purer than the essence energy of the Genesis vein. It was as if it contained Tao light. Good breasts! Wishing Crocodile's eyes lit up. Lin Tian was speechless. What did he mean by good breasts? These 2 words really made people feel that it was obscene. He explained. The divine juice earth milk is a treasure nurtured by the earth vein. It can only be nurtured in some extraordinary terrain. Moreover, Only 4 or 5 drops can be produced in a year. It contains endless spirit energy and has the effect of reviving flesh and bones. It can strengthen one's spirit, cleanse one's divine sense, and increase one's lifespan. This kind of thing was recorded in detail in the dragon burial scripture. He recognized it with a single glance. His eyes were filled with radiance because such a precious thing had actually condensed into a small puddle in this place. It was simply too shocking. Even Nirvana realm experts would be shocked if they saw it. Then, in the next moment, he was slightly moved and secretly frowned. To be able to produce so much divine sap earth milk, the terrain here should be very amazing, but divine sap earth milk was only born in an extraordinary grand momentum of heaven and earth, and with so much divine sap earth milk here, the terrain here should be very grand. However, after he explored with the dragon pattern, he did not feel anything special. Other than the spirit pattern from before, he did not find anything special. He felt that the terrain here was at most a little better than ordinary terrain, and was not related to extraordinary at all. Strange. He frowned and couldn't figure it out. He used the dragon burial scripture to explore the terrain here, but he still didn't find anything special. In the end, he shook his head and stopped thinking about it. "Refine them," he said to Bai Chiu and the other 2 and Wishing Crocodile. "I'm waiting," Wishing Crocodile said. At that moment, the 4 people and 1 crocodile each chose a position next to the small puddle and circulated the ancient scripture cultivation method together, refining the divine sap earth milk here together. Suddenly, the divine sap earth milk emitted a strange light, and wisps of it surged into the 4 people and 1 crocodile's bodies, rich and abundant in spiritual energy. Buzz! Lin Tian's body flickered with a faint golden light. The Sun Heart Sutra circulated very peacefully, guiding the spiritual light contained in the divine sap earth milk into his body to temper his soul and divine sense, and at the same time, continue to temper his flesh and internal organs. The spiritual light of this divine sap earth milk was very gentle. After entering his body, it made him feel as if he was soaking in a hot spring. His entire body was comfortable, and his divine sense gradually became more crystalline. The spiritual energy intertwined with his soul and body also began to gradually become stronger. His flesh, blood, soul, and divine sense were all enveloped in this kind of spiritual light of the divine sap earth milk. He only felt that his spiritual sense was also strengthened. Then, he calmed his heart and focused, slowly evolving his Tao. There were wisps of nameless Tao laws intertwining around him. Just like that, 2 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Boom! At this time, a strong force emerged from his body, rolling like a celestial river from the starry sky. His clothes fluttered without wind, and he slowly opened his eyes. "4th tier of the Great Path," he whispered softly. Early on, after killing Sun Physically Guhuang, his cultivation had already reached the peak of the 3rd tier of the Great Path. Then, just now, he had refined a lot of earth vein primary light, and comprehended and evolved the profundities of the divine sap earth milk, so his cultivation was even more profound. At this time, after refining the divine sap earth milk, he quickly stepped into the 4th tier of the Great Path. He clenched his fist slightly. His physical body had become stronger, and the divine power in his body was more vigorous. There was an obvious improvement in his strength. Most importantly, his soul had become much stronger, his divine sense had become more crystalline, and his sea of consciousness had become much broader. Good! He thought to himself. After a slight pause, he closed his eyes again and silently stabilized his realm. Then, after another hour, he opened his eyes again and stood up. At this time, Bai Chiu, the other 2, and the Wishing Crocodile were still cultivating. He did not disturb them and quietly waited by the side. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Boom! Demonic power surged. The Wishing Crocodile was still the first to advance, from the 2nd tier of the Great Path to the 3rd tier of the Great Path. The Wishing Crocodile suppressed its laughter and flapped its colorful wings to fly to Lin Tian's side. Lin Tian glanced at it, and did not say anything. Soon, Another 2 days had passed. 2 days later, Baichio and the other two broke through one after another, all from the second tier of the Great Path to the third tier of the Great Path. Their strength had greatly improved. At this time, all the divine sap earth milk in the small puddle had been refined, and not a single drop was left. Let's go. Lin Tian smiled. The divine sap earth milk had been refined, so there was no need to stay here. The three of them and the crocodile all nodded and walked toward the surface along the path they had dug. However, just as the group of people walked a few meters, a soft sound suddenly came from behind them, causing the air here to instantly become much colder. The group of people naturally had a strange feeling and looked back. They saw a wisp of black fog coming out of the small puddle that previously contained the divine sap earth milk. Suddenly, the group of people was a little surprised. Lin Tian's eyes flashed with the light of dragon patterns, and the dragon patterns on the soles of his feet spread out in all directions. Then, he was shocked. God's spiritual land! He was surprised. Beside him, the three of them and the crocodile all looked at him. Obviously, they did not understand the terrain and so on. Lin Tian explained. God's spiritual land is known as the place where gods are born, and it contains endless wonders. As he spoke, the light in his eyes intertwined, and he looked at the small puddle that had already dried up and muttered to himself. This puddle seems to be the core of the god's spiritual land. Previously, the divine sap earth milk gathered here and filled this core, thus interfering with the perception of my dragon patterns. However, now that the divine sap earth milk has been completely refined, my perception of this place is still very weak. Moreover, this black fog. He looked at the black fog coming out from the small puddle and frowned slightly. The light of the dragon patterns in his eyes instantly became brighter, and with the full power of the fourth firmament of the great Tao, the dragon patterns that were sent out became even more resplendent. Then, after 3 breaths, his expression suddenly changed, and he lowered his head to look at the place deeper underground. There is a big tomb below here. What? At the side, the three of them and the crocodile were shocked. Wishing Crocodile opened his eyes wide. Below here, there is actually, crack! A crisp sound was heard, and it directly interrupted Wishing Crocodile's words. At this moment, with the dried-up puddle as the center, cracks quickly spread out in all directions. Then, the ground under their feet directly collapsed, and rolling Yin-Chi suddenly rushed out. This kind of Yin-Chi was a bit shocking. It was pitch black, like a raging sea rolling over, and even an old monster like Wishing Crocodile was shocked. Lin Tian operated the Heart Sutra of Sun, and golden divine light was vast and mighty, enveloping the whole group in it, blocking all the Yin-Chi that rushed out. Why is there a tomb here? And this Yin-Chi is too dense. Didn't the rumors say that this immortal mansion world has never been opened before? Previously, it was only because 2 celestial lords entered and left some clues that people found out about the existence of this immortal mansion world in the central region. Could it be that this is the tomb of some celestial lord? Baichio stared. Impossible! Although the Yin-Chi here is frighteningly strong, it is not especially terrifying. Even if it is 1,000,000 times stronger, it is still far from the level of a celestial lord's tomb. Wishing Crocodile shook his head, thought for a moment, and said, This immortal mansion world has existed for a long time, and there are many demonic beasts living here. Perhaps a powerful demonic beast buried itself here when its lifespan dried up. That should be the case. Lin Tian nodded, very much agreeing with Wishing Crocodile's analysis. He also thought so. He looked down, and his eyes flashed. Let's go down and take a look. I think there should be a lot of good things in this tomb. At this moment, he finally understood why he could not sense the uniqueness of this terrain with his dragon patterns. It was not only because the immortal milk juice in the small puddle happened to be in the core area of this terrain, interfering with the dragon pattern's perception, but also because there was a big tomb in this divine spiritual land. Almost all the earth veins' general momentum gathered in this big tomb. Based on this point, the existence that chose to build the tomb here must be very extraordinary, or else it would be impossible to see the uniqueness of this place. In this way, such an existence must have very rich burial goods. Of course, let's go down quickly, Wishing Crocodile said. The group did not hesitate, and immediately descended. At the same time, they were vigilant of their surroundings. Soon, dozens of breaths passed, and the 4 people and 1 crocodile finally landed at the bottom, stepping on the somewhat damp ground. Roar! Almost at the moment they landed, pairs of demonic eyes lit up. Some were dark green, some were blood red, and some were seeping purple. They were all intertwined with a dense black light of death, eerie and frightening. Immediately, in the next moment, corpses rushed over. There were many of them. Some had a single horn on their heads, some had spirit armor on their backs, and some had long tails. Their flesh was rotten, and they were all demonic bodies. Looking at the appearance of these corpses, we know that this is indeed the tomb of a demonic expert. Moreover, according to the scale of the Chi here, the tomb owner was at least a Nirvana realm demonic beast saint when he was alive. Wishing Crocodile said. Lin Tian nodded, and with a wave of his right hand, a large amount of golden light turned into sword light, and all the corpses that rushed over were all shattered. There's an underground palace hall in front. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.